It all begins on a devastated battlefield with a man standing atop a mountain of fallen warriors. At that moment, our MC, whose name is Ash, approaches him. The man asks why the MC is there, since he had entrusted him with the mission to conquer the East. Exhausted and severely injured, Ash stays silent for a few moments, and then tells the man that he is there to take him down. With his sword in hand, Ash reveals he knew from the start about the plan to use his unit as disposable bait. Feeling betrayed, he calls the man in front of him, Father. Without showing a single ounce of remorse, Roderick confirms that this was the only use for a wingless disappointment like his own son. This wounded young man is Ash, a member of an extremely powerful family. The House of Elmheim is known for its brutal strength. The most important military bloodline on the continent protects the royal family, led by Roderick, the sole bearer of the 7 wings. In the past, the family leader rescued Ash when he was just a baby on the brink of fading away in a blizzard. Because of that, the boy grew up training tirelessly to his physical limit. He always gave it his all in battles just to try and repay that life debt. However, everyone around him mocked him, claiming that a wingless person could never make it up to his own father. The emblem of the wings defines the user's magical power, with Ash being the only one among his siblings to possess none of it. Even so, he continued his heavy training, blindly believing that all this devotion would be rewarded. He then remembers the ambush he had suffered moments prior. By the time Ash realized it, it was already too late. His entire battalion was surrounded by enemy soldiers. Back in the present, Ash asks if that betrayal is the leader's answer for all his loyalty over the years. Cold and impatient, the old man says that a mere tool shouldn't have expectations and tells him to get lost. Hearing these cruel words completely shatters any hope the boy still had left. Then he leaps forward furiously to attack, regretting having been such a fool. Roderick just watches his adopted sons advance without showing any concern. Ash's strike carries all the frustration of having trusted the man who raised him. But the patriarch remains motionless and calm. Right after, 2 knights appear and bind Ash with a chain. The 2 knights then attack the MC at the same time, making him feel excruciating pain. Taking advantage of the situation, one of the siblings laughs in his face, claiming that a wingless nobody would never understand his place. Now forced to his knees in the snow, Ash is surrounded by his own family as they continue to humiliate him. Spitting blood, the boy asks why he was saved in the past if the intention was always to throw him away. The patriarch crouches in front of him and states that he never needed garbage like him. Without a drop of pity, the man tightly grabs the wounded boy's hair. He reveals that the only thing that truly mattered was the power of the 7 wings hidden inside that body. Ash goes into absolute shock upon hearing about this power. Roderick then mentions that our MC's mother was very useful, and then says that his birth served only his purposes. As the betrayer turns his back and walks away, the boy reaches out, begging for answers. Desperate to understand the truth about his mother, he screams the traitor's name, but his strength quickly fades and the intense cold takes over his body. Barely holding on to consciousness, the MC wonders what the true purpose of his miserable life was. In another location amidst an intense blizzard, our MC opens his eyes and notices snowflakes falling on his face. He was freezing in the middle of that harsh winter. Upon noticing that he can feel his surroundings, he realizes he isn't in the afterlife and that this is reality. Lost, the MC tries to understand where he ended up in the middle of all that violent snowstorm. When he raises his short little arms, he gets confused by his own size. The realization soon hits him, revealing that he has been reborn into the body of a newborn baby. At that moment, he notices he is being protected by the frozen body of a fallen woman. Suddenly, he hears aggressive voices echoing through the dark forest. A group of mounted soldiers searches the area, ordering to look for the fugitive. The knights state they need to retrieve the child at all costs to please Roderick. Shock takes over his childish face upon recognizing that cursed name. He tries to process the information, remembering the face of the man who took him out in cold blood. It becomes obvious that he is the exact target of that relentless search. Ash connects the dots and deduces the craziness of the situation, realizing he went back to the day he was adopted in the past. The guard's heavy footsteps begin to approach the place where he is hiding. With no time to freak out, the child decides to leave the questions for later. Knowing he cannot fall into the hands of his future eliminator again, the baby crawls away from the woman's body. Even with his tiny body sinking into the thick snow, he drags himself with all his might. His only goal is to run as far away from that cursed place as possible. The survival instinct makes his small hands emit a magical light in the snow. Exhaustion soon kicks in, making his breathing heavy due to the biting cold. Mysteriously, the energy increases so much that he feels his own limbs burning. However, he ignores the physical pain and keeps crawling, searching for a way out. The MC promises himself that he will survive this hellish night no matter what. The memory of being betrayed and abandoned fuels his willpower. Full of resentment, the boy uses this mysterious energy to push forward, swearing payback against the patriarch. However, his fragile body's limit is reached, and he ends up passing out in the middle of the white wasteland. Hours later, someone finally finds the unconscious baby on the frozen ground. A little girl points at the boy and catches the attention of an elegant man accompanying her. The man is surprised by the scene, being revealed as the leader of the High-Fried Vice County. Carefully, the nobleman picks the newborn up in his arms, completely intrigued as to why a child would be abandoned there. Resting on the nobleman's shoulder, the baby sleeps peacefully after the rescue. Utterly shocked, the Viscount stares at the child in his arms. He looks at the long trail left in the snow and tries to understand how such a small being traveled all that distance. Quite intrigued, the man wonders who on earth this mysterious child could be. Meanwhile, the MC wakes up in a dark and empty space, not knowing where he ended up. Floating in this immensity, he reaches out trying to catch a glowing feather descending towards him. Right then, someone pinches his nose hard, making him wake up instantly. As soon as his vision focuses, he comes face to face with three excited little girls announcing that he finally woke up. Surrounded by the girls, Ash is terrified, not understanding what is going on there. One of the girls pinches his cheeks while another tries to stop her from hurting the child. Bothered by the situation, the boy pushes hard and manages to break free from their arms. Wasting no time, he starts crawling quickly across the smooth hallway floor. Looking back in panic, the MC despairs over the confusion. The girls run right behind, asking him to stop, while Ash just wants to know why they are chasing him. During the desperate escape, the baby's body begins to emanate a strong magical light. His eyes glow intensely as he activates the mysterious energy. Launched into the air by a pillar of light, he realizes in shock that this is pure magical power. The baby spins in the air completely out of control. Unable to master the magic, the MC starts falling from the sky towards the ground. He squeezes his eyes shut, bracing for the worst possible impact. However, the Viscount catches him just in time, commenting that he really is a very strange baby for falling from the sky. Still sweating cold, the boy immediately recognizes the man's face. That is Viscount Hefried, the older brother of the main family's leader. Ash quickly figures out that he ended up at the secondary family's estate of that cursed clan. The man who saved him is exactly the leader of this branch house. In the past, Hefried was one of the two pillars that protected the royalty, but he ended up falling in a civil war. This conflict also resulted in the downfall of the entire secondary house. Analyzing the situation, the MC is certain that he truly went back in time. Even so, he laments the irony of having run away from the main family only to be picked up by his eliminator's brother. Shortly after, the Viscount's wife holds the child, amazed by the fact that his magic went out of control. The noblewoman shows a welcoming and affectionate smile. She kisses the baby's forehead and tries to calm him down, assuring him that he's safe now. Accustomed only to rejection, the boy is surprised by this display of affection. Watching the scene, Hefried maintains a soft gaze. Then the nobleman reaches out and states that this child possesses an unimaginable power. To prove his point, he pulls down the baby's clothes, revealing a mark on his back. Seeing the reflection in the mirror, the woman is astonished to recognize the emblem of the 7 wings. Ash looks at his own body in shock, not understanding how he got that mark. In that instant, the memory of his demise comes flooding back. He remembers Roderick stating that he only wanted the power of the 7 wings hidden inside him. The memory of the patriarch grabbing his hair brings all the anger back. The boy realizes that in the past, the villain abandoned him after stealing his energy. Furious, the MC understands that he was called useless his whole life precisely by the man who stole his wings. The Viscount's wife notices the baby's irritated expression and asks what their next step will be. With a serious expression, Hefried reflects on what they should do with the child from now on. Sensing the danger of the situation, the baby concludes that things are looking bad for him. He swears to himself that he cannot let this power fall into enemy hands, as he needs it for his payback. Surprising everyone, the Viscount firmly declares that he is going to adopt the boy. Ash widens his eyes, shocked by the sudden decision. The nobleman calmly brings his hand closer to the child. Gently rubbing the boy's head, he explains that the boy is just a little bird that can't fly yet. Hefried promises that he will take the responsibility of raising him until the day the young one decides to fly on his own. Hearing these words deeply touches the MC's heart. Suddenly, a noise at the door interrupts the family moment. The 3 little girls fall to the floor after eavesdropping on the conversation from outside. They get up awkwardly and confess that they were just worried about the little baby. Quickly, the kids run over to their mother wanting to see their new, little brother. With the baby in her lap, The woman wonders what the youngest one's name should be. She looks at the boy with a gentle smile while thinking of a good option. Holding the child up against the window's light, the noblewoman names him Aster, the new star of the house. 10 years pass since the rescue, and a carriage arrives at a grand noble estate. The Viscount, now older, is greeted by the servants right at the entrance. Next, a well-dressed young man begins to step down from the carriage. This is the grown-up MC, using his new name, Aster. Showing good manners, he reaches out to help his sister Alphen step down the stairs. Smiling, the girl thanks her younger brother for his kindness. The two walk side by side through the event's courtyard. They came to participate in the assembly of the Dance of Swords, an important tournament in the region. This is a social gathering where martial houses show off their warriors' skills in intense magical combat. The event serves as a stage for the young talents of each family to prove their worth. As soon as the Viscount and his children enter the hall, the guests start gossiping. The nobles mock the secondary family, calling Aster an adopted nobody. They whisper mean things, wondering how long Hefried is going to embarrass the clan's name. Hearing the insults from afar, the boy stares at the crowd and concludes that this place is full of trash. Sensing the heavy atmosphere, Alphen quietly asks her brother to ignore the provocations. Aster tightly clenches his fists, remembering that in this place, any display of weakness means the end. The MC continues walking seriously beside his sister towards the event. Observing the hostile environment, Hefried comments that this is the secondary family's current situation in front of others. Then, the nobleman looks back, stating that he made a point of having the young man see all of this with his own eyes. He asks directly if his adopted son is disappointed by the cold reception. Unfazed, Aster answers no, assuring that this level of coldness suits him perfectly. Hearing this confident answer draws a relieved chuckle from the patriarch. As they move forward, the young man remembers his past life, when he had the worst debut possible for being considered the family's disgrace. However, he reflects that things are different now since he regained the power of the 7 wings. A sharp look appears on the boy's face, completely determined to change his destiny. With that, the three continue walking together towards the grand entrance of the tournament. From the top of the building, 2 young nobles watch the family's arrival with massive disdain. Feeling the tense vibe, the boy keeps his posture focused on the goal. The Viscount takes the lead and gets his children's attention. The MC mentally affirms that it's time to start with a dazzling debut in high society. The event's arena is boiling, portraying the era when knights ruled the world. A competitor steps forward, delivering a swift strike with his sword. The opponent defends the attack, showing that a warrior needed power and elegance. The duel continues intensely in the center of the arena, where brute force defines sword skill. Meanwhile, elegance and movements guaranteed the much-desired fame among the nobles. The surrounding crowd cheers at every violent impact during the combat. The 2 opponents take their distance, preparing for the next brutal clash. One of their swords breaks under the force of an overwhelming magic, ending the dispute in a harsh way. The winner raises his blade in celebration, making it clear that the ultimate symbol of all that was the crest. A glowing mark on the knight's hand confirms his superior magical mastery. Watching the fights from the balcony, Aster comments to Alphen that this place is still incredibly intense. The girl agrees in a good mood, perfectly understanding why her other sisters refuse to show up there. At that moment, the MC stares at the courtyard and starts recalling dark memories from the past. He remembers when he was thrown to the ground and cowardly humiliated by other nobles of the same age. His sister's confused voice calls his name, suddenly snapping him out of his bad thoughts. Alphen notices her brother's silence and asks if he is nervous about his first sword dance festival. Quite honestly, Aster answers no, revealing that the experience just feels nostalgic to him. The girl watches him without saying anything, a bit surprised by the youngest's mature response. Hefried approaches and lets them know he'll need to leave for a meeting, asking the boy to look after his sister. Annoyed by the recommendation, Alphen protests, stating she is much more capable of taking care of herself than the MC. The father ignores the complaint and touches his son's shoulder, suggesting he takes the opportunity to network with the youngsters at the event. Right after, the nobleman demands in a serious whisper that the young man hide the power of the 7 wings no matter what. The young man watches the patriarch walk away down the hall, absorbing the advice he received. However, he quickly notices several glares loaded with hate coming from the shadows of the hall. Scratching his head, the boy ironically wonders how he is supposed to connect with such aggressive people. Suddenly, something downstairs catches Aster's attention. Ignoring the bad vibe, he starts walking down the stairs, leaving the girl confused about where he is going. He walks determinedly towards the lobby, focused on following the idea of interacting with others. Approaching a rest area, the boy stops in front of a group of obnoxious youngsters. A red-haired guy, sitting comfortably on the sofa, stares at him with disdain and asks who he is. In a polite tone, Aster introduces himself to Darius, stating that he saw him from afar and decided to say hi. Keeping up the formality, he reveals his full name and declares himself as his younger brother. Darius stares at him coldly without changing his relaxed posture. The friend sitting next to him whispers, warning that this is the boy adopted by the secondary family. Understanding the situation, the heir mockingly questions the boy's audacity in using the main surname. Staring at the two, the MC confirms that Darius and Grion were the legitimate heirs who ended his life in his past life. Back then, they seemed terrifying, but the young man's view was very different now. He looks at the circle of jerks and concludes that they are nothing more than spoiled brats pretending to be adults. Aster's eyes go dark for a moment as he hears his sister's voice echoing through the place. Alphen arrives grabbing his arm in a hurry, pulling him to leave after the quick greeting. The girl glares at the youngsters angrily, while Darius mocks, asking if she also showed up there. The noble continues to provoke, asking if she wasn't planning on hiding behind her dad that day. Full of arrogance, he demands that the young woman go entertain them, justifying that this is a direct order from the main family. Furious with the abuse of power, Alphen immediately refuses, making it clear that the secondary house is nobody's servant. The MC tries to intervene calmly, calling the girl to prevent the situation from getting worse. Unwilling to accept the refusal, Darius tightly grabs Alphen's arm to stop her from leaving. The boy notices the sudden movement and his expression changes right away. Showing a scary face, the noble prepares to say a tremendous atrocity. He yells in the middle of the hall that her father failed to protect the king in the past. The girl suffers hearing the jerk bring up that Roderick cut off his own brother's arm as punishment for that failure. Darius even thanks the heavens for not carrying that loser blood in his veins. Unable to stand the insult, Alphen steps forward demanding he take back what he just said about Hyfried. Before she could retaliate, the guy throws all the wine from his glass right into the young woman's face. Completely drenched, the girl hears that the Viscount only managed to produce useless daughters incapable of inheriting the title. Twirling the glass in his hand, the heir arrogantly bets that her father must feel a lot of shame about it. He even tells the girl to show up wearing rags next time, so she won't care about getting dirty in the hall. Standing right behind his sister, the MC glares at them with a dark look, remembering that he was worried on the way there. He watches the jerks laughing at the humiliation and reflects that he was afraid of not feeling angry anymore when seeing them again in this new life. With a swift movement, Aster's hand grabs an unopened bottle that was on the table. Positioning himself in front of the young woman, he holds the object firmly and notes that he is relieved to still feel hate for those idiots. Catching everyone's attention in the hall, the MC raises the bottle and yells Darius's name. Giving no time for an answer, Aster hurls the object with all his might towards the air. While the container flies through the air, the young man states that the jerk is still the same piece of trash as always. The impact shatters the bottle right on the noble's head, leaving him dazed as the liquid runs down his face. The sudden aggression startles his friends, while Alphen screams her brother's name completely shocked. Wiping his dirty face, Darius tries to figure out what just hit him. Aster asks in a mocking tone if that is grape juice, assuring that the drink perfectly matches a spoiled noble. He then remembers a training session he had with Hyfried 3 years ago, where he released a colossal magical aura. On that occasion, the girls fell to the floor crying, and the frightened father asked if the boy was trying to eliminate his own sisters. The crushing pressure of that power completely terrified the members of the secondary family. Faced with that absurd demonstration, the Viscount concluded that this was the true and dangerous power of the Seven Wings. The Patriarch worriedly wondered if such an unstable force could ever really be controlled by anyone. However, the MC promised himself that he would manage to master all that lethal energy. Back in the present, a guard rushes into the meeting room to deliver an urgent message to the Viscount. Hyfryd questions the reason for that desperate interruption right in the middle of the main family's conversations. The guard reveals that the sons of the main and secondary houses are dueling in the event's courtyard. This news catches everyone by surprise, especially the merciless silver-haired leader of the House of Elmheim. Desperate about the danger his son is in, Hyfryd sprints down the hallway immediately to stop the tragedy. Reaching the hall's balcony, he yells his daughter's name and demands to know what on earth happened down there. Meanwhile, another noble points at the arena with an excited smile, catching the main leader's attention. Down in the center, Aster and Darius already have their swords drawn in a dispute that the leadership considers rare to see. Watching the mass from above, the white-haired patriarch comments that the end of this confrontation will dictate a lot of things. The other party guests also approach the windows to watch the beef from the front row. The muscular noble laughs, thinking this sword dance tournament is going to end up getting pretty ugly. Focusing on the clash, Darius concentrates power in his blade and states that picking a fight with the main house is pure idiocy. The intense glow in the redhead's hand reveals the four-wing crest, impressing the watching crowd. Full of arrogance, he tells Aster to show his own emblem so they can compare the glaring difference in level. The heir mocks, asking if the boy is too embarrassed to show his mark, and the MC calmly agrees. Aster coldly argues that he wouldn't have the guts to show off such an insignificant pattern with so much pride. Hearing this absolute contempt makes the noble's blood boil with instant hate. Furious, Darius decrees that if he wins, he'll make the boy his dog, but Aster demands an apology for his sister. Unwilling to accept the conditions, the redhead charges with everything, yelling that he will enslave him for the rest of his life. The swords collide violently, generating an explosion of sparks right at the first impact of the fight. The brute force of the attack forces the MC to slide backwards across the courtyard to create distance. Despite the initial pressure, he keeps a firm stance and focuses only on the movement of the enemy blade. Confident in his magical advantage, Darius brags about using the true power of a chosen one. He then unleashes a swift and fierce sequence of slashes against his opponent. Watching the struggle from above, Alphen screams her brother's name, quite worried about the situation. The muscular noble watches the scene closely and notes that the heir's sword technique is still very immature. However, the overwhelming amount of mana generated by the crest ends up compensating for the lack of combat skill. The difference in strength in the world is clear, as if the power of the single wing equals only the flame of a candle. The mana sealed in 4 wings carries the destructive potential of a true lethal explosion. The redhead keeps pressing the attacks and mocks the courage the adopted boy was showing just a moment ago. He sarcastically questions if the boy wasn't going to force him to apologize to the humble secondary sister. Taking a massive leap, the heir raises his flaming sword and tells his opponent to show his true power. Seeing that deadly strike coming from above, one of the fancy guests already declares that the fight is over. The heir's blade comes down with absurd speed, aiming to slice the enemy in half once and for all. In a fluid motion, Aster defends against the colossal impact and redirects all the force of the attack straight into the ground. The ease of the defense leaves Darius startled and unable to understand how his perfect strike failed. Staring the jerk down up close, the MC coldly warns that he talks too much. Taking advantage of the wide-open guard, the boy steps in, delivering a clean cut to the adversary's abdomen. Aster then stands firmly in the arena as an impressive energy begins to emanate from his body. He reveals that he spent the entire last decade just learning to control his own mana, waiting for the moment of his payback. Releasing a blinding golden aura through the sword, the young man strikes back with an absurd intensity. The clash of weapons finally makes the red-haired heir step back, groaning in pain from the immense pressure on his arm. His shoes drag across the stone floor in a desperate attempt to keep his balance. On the balcony, the blonde friend widens his eyes in amazement, seeing his buddy getting beaten in the dispute. Darius can barely hold his own weapon as he is violently pushed by the MC's superior strength. Trembling with effort and his face bleeding, the noble mutters in disbelief that he shouldn't be losing while having a 4-wing emblem. On the other side of the blade, Aster just maintains an intimidating gaze, completely covered by his supreme magic. The audience panics, realizing that Darius is getting massacred in a unilateral and merciless way. They start asking each other in fear if the main family has anyone capable of dealing with this kind of power. Focusing on annihilating the target, the boy intensifies the dark energy glowing in his eyes. Watching the carnage from the balcony, Heffrey clenches his hand and concludes that things will go very wrong if they continue. At the limit of his own endurance, the redhead lets out an agonized scream, trying to hold back the overwhelming advance of the attack. At that moment, the MC remembers the exact moment of his past life where this same heir laughed at his cruel demise. The traumatic memory makes Aster's hate explode into a blast of uncontrollable magic across the entire arena. With fury stamped on his face, the young man prepares the decisive blow to tear the enemy apart and finish his payback right then and there. Realizing the clear fatal intention, the Viscount screams, desperately ordering his son to stop the attack immediately. Hearing the voice of the one who saved him makes the boy divert the sword's trajectory at the last second, exploding the lethal magic into the air. The colossal destruction so narrowly avoided leaves the muscular noble in absolute silence. The final strike shattered the redhead's sword and made him fall to his knees on the stone courtyard, totally defeated. Panting and humiliated, the heir listens as Aster returns the earlier insult and tells him to come dressed in rags next time. The MC coldly suggests the jerk wear something he doesn't mind getting dirty, calling him cousin with a tone of contempt. Sheathing the weapon with elegance, Aster turns his back and assures himself that he is no longer the wingless nobody from before. High up on the balcony, Alphen watches the end of the combat, visibly relieved. The MC concludes that just realizing this new strength of his is enough to clear his mind for now. Right then, a threatening gaze shines intensely from the shadows, carrying a heavy aura. A terrifying reddish presence takes over the hall and catches Aster's attention. He turns his head in shock as he feels the absolute weight of that oppressive energy. Roderick's fury overflows as a thick magical mist envelops his entire body at the top of the stairs. Facing the threat, the boy mutters the patriarch's name with tension. The nobles around comment in shock that the Viscount's youngest son actually defeated the third heir. As heavy footsteps come down the stairs, the guests predict that the leader will never stay quiet after this humiliation. The MC turns completely around, bracing himself to deal with the approaching problem. The leader of the main family's 8th generation appears before everyone with an imposing posture. He walks slowly until he stops facing Aster in the middle of the ruined courtyard. The Duke displays a face taken over by indignation upon seeing the pathetic scene on the ground. Keeping his guard up, the boy stares right back at him without backing down a single inch. Roderick takes another step forward, marking his overwhelming presence in front of the young warrior. Desperate, the redhead drags himself across the floor and grabs his own father's leg, looking for salvation. Darius accuses the boy of being a bold bastard for challenging the main family's authority. He begs the Duke to use his supreme power and teach the opponent a painful lesson. However, the only answer he gets is a brutal stomp from Roderick, crushing his injured hand. The mind-numbing pain makes the heir scream in agony as blood splatters on the stones. The grotesque scene leaves the entire audience paralyzed with dread. The redhead trembles uncontrollably, totally terrified by the patriarch's ruthless attitude. Roderick coldly asks why the loser of the duel continues to act in such a shameful manner. Noticing his brother's fatal intention, Hyfried yells desperately for him to stop immediately. But the Duke already brings the blade down with full force, stating that someone incapable of getting payback doesn't deserve to hold a sword. The deadly gleam of the steel cuts through the air in a swift and merciless motion. The Viscount watches the scene in shock, foreseeing an imminent tragedy. To everyone's surprise, Aster intercepts the brutal strike and prevents Darius from being mutilated. The MC justifies his meddling by pointing out that the cousin hasn't apologized to Alphen yet. Holding the block steady, the boy ironically asks his uncle to save the punishment for after the debt is paid. Staring at the boy, Roderick comments with disdain that he heard about the orphan picked up by Hyfried. Without lowering his head, Aster proudly declares that he is the Viscount's legitimate son and has learned the weight of the family name very well. The firm answer leaves the Duke in a brief moment of deadly silence. Soon his red aura explodes violently, accusing the young man of dishonoring the main house unnecessarily. The immense magical pressure released by the Patriarch is closely watched by the elite guests. A blonde noble agrees that the situation is far past being just a little childish fight. Another guest reinforces that the consequences for that act will be extremely severe. The Viscount swallows hard, remembering that he lost his own arm in the past to pay for a failure. Pressing the blade with even more force, Roderick demands to know which body part the kid is going to offer as compensation. With a lot of sarcasm in his voice, the MC demands proper respect from his uncle. He clarifies that it was a legitimate duel to defend his house's honor against dirty insults. The silver-haired villain listens to the boy's audacity without changing his cold expression. Unleashing his own glowing energy, Aster uses Roderick's words against him and warns he won't lose a single finger there. Watching from afar, Alphen is completely bewildered by her brother's absurd courage. The blue-haired noble laughs, finding it impossible that this prodigy is only 10 years old. The boy's audacity leaves the silver-haired Duke in thoughtful silence for a moment. He calmly pulls his sword away and pretends to accept the imposed conditions. However, ordering the boy to set his stance, the leader suddenly lunges forward. Aster barely has time to react, noticing the enemy's absurd movement. In the blink of an eye, the young man has to dodge a devastating and cowardly strike. The impact of Roderick's blade against the ground creates a wave of destruction that tears up the entire courtyard. Seeing his demise pass so close to her brother, Alphen covers her mouth in shock. Desperate about the fatal attack, Hyfried screams his brother's name at the top of his lungs. Without thinking twice, the Viscount leaps from the balcony straight into the combat arena. He lands right in front of his adopted son and uses his own weapon to intercept the next brutal strike. With only one arm, the father tries his hardest to hold back the Patriarch's crushing force. Holding back the pressure, Hyfried anxiously asks if the boy suffered any serious injuries. A cloud of dust and debris rises into the air around the warriors after the massive impact. The man gulps and looks back, startled by what he just witnessed. Despite the scare, Aster managed to dig his sword into the ground and break his own body without suffering a single scratch. With a small cut on his face, the MC displays a deadly glare focused solely on his payback against the Duke. Roderick watches the secondary family's stubborn resistance coldly. Without saying another word, the ruthless leader sheathes his weapon and turns his back to leave the arena. Taking the cue, the hall's guards rush to carry Darius's battered body far away from there. Calmer now, the Viscount tightly holds his son's shoulders and breathes a sigh of relief. Deactivating his fatal aura, Aster completely changes his expression and says he kept his promise to control himself. The father tearfully agrees, praising the magnificent posture the boy showed in combat. Meanwhile, the patriarch climbs the palace stairs escorted by his allies. One of the nobles walking with him comments that the sudden attack was a rather childish move. The red-haired ally argues that if they let the boy say whatever he wanted, the main family would lose everyone's respect. The crowd acknowledges that surviving with his head held high against Roderick has turned Aster into a rising star. The blonde noble wipes the sweat from his face, confessing he was afraid the boy would split the House of Elmheim's power in half. With a heavy expression, the Duke predicts that an era of chaos and unrest is about to arrive. He concludes that a storm capable of tearing the entire world to pieces was just born in the courtyard. While the secondary family hubs down below, the sky clears up, indicating the worst is over. Everything starts again in the training grounds, where Aster lands a clean hit with a wooden sword that knocks the knight to the ground. Panting after the fall, the man praises the boy's splendid move. He gets up right after and calls the MC young master with great respect. Watching from a distance, two guards are amazed by the boy's incredible skill. Remembering he is only 10 years old, one of them comments that his motivation to train so hard sparked after returning from the assembly, where he defeated Roderick's third son. The other agrees that it's satisfying to see, since the main family has always treated them with deep contempt. Walking with his training weapon, the MC reflects that he showed enough power and presence at that grand event. That should silence the rumors mocking the Viscount's family and calling them a disgrace to the Elmheims. But the big obstacle remains the main house, making the boy wish he had tested his real strength to the limit. He wishes he had pushed even further during that fight in the hall to find out how much of his own magic he could handle. However, Aster is fully aware that his current level isn't enough to defeat Roderick in a direct clash. After all, the wing emblem serves only as a gauge for the amount of hidden energy someone possesses. Having an innate treasure is useless without control, and he still can't draw out the full destructive potential of the 7 wings. Delivering a heavy slash into the air, the MC wishes he could test this supreme power without the constant fear of losing his mind. An intense golden glow lights up the young man's eyes as he focuses on this distant goal. The wooden sword violently strikes the stone floor after the sequence of moves. With several defeated knights around him, the boy impatiently asks if there's no one else to spar with him. At that exact moment, he hears footsteps approaching from behind. Alphen appears sighing and points out that her brother overdid it again, letting him know right after that their father's calling for him. The MC quickly acknowledges the message and promises to go see the Viscount right away. Noticing his sister, Aster comments that the clothes she is wearing are quite different from her usual style. The girl tilts her head, not understanding the reason for the sudden observation. He explains it's rare to see her in training gear, recalling she hated wearing anything that wasn't cute or elegant. Alphen confesses that watching her brother fight made her realize she needs to find a balance and change her own stance for the future. Understanding the warrior's message, the boy listens carefully to what's coming next. Pointing a wooden blade at his face, the young woman confidently announces that they will train hard together when he returns. The MC gives a genuine happy smile at his protector's new determination. Walking out of the dirt yard, Aster casually asks her to go easy on him during their next session. Arriving at the Viscount's isolated office, the young man gives a few light knocks on the large door. He politely asks for permission to enter as he steps into the room fully bathed in the afternoon sun. Sitting at his desk, Hifrid asks the boy to take a seat and start the conversation. Aster promptly obeys, settling into the armchair across from his adopted father. The Viscount starts the subject by recalling that it's been 10 years since they welcomed the boy into that very house. Placing a small velvet box on the table, the man confesses he planned to wait until the young man grew up a bit more before acting. Curious about the luxurious object, the MC asks what that ring with an embedded red stone is all about. Hifrid reveals seriously that the jewel is the official proof of the house's next leader. Surprised, Aster listens as the patriarch states his wish to pass the Viscounty's leadership directly to him. The noble explains that the branch family's position in the current political landscape is extremely fragile and delicate. Despite carrying the Elmheim surname, they are lords tasked with protecting a territory full of heavy responsibilities. Because of this constant pressure, the man emphasizes that he cannot leave the successor's seat empty for much longer. Concerned about the harmony of the home, the boy asks if his sisters agree with such a sudden decision. The Viscount lets him know that the other daughters will return from the Night Academy in 3 days, and he intends to talk to everyone at once. At that, the MC imagines the return of Martha and his fearsome sister Kudo to the countryside mansion. He deduces with a tense smile that the girls, especially the hot-headed warrior, are going to be absolutely furious with this choice. After all, the young woman always hated the adopted boy simply because he was born male and possessed the magical miracle. Turning down the offer immediately, Aster gets up from the chair and declares that he absolutely cannot accept the leadership. He argues that he's still an immature rookie, incapable of controlling his own magic, and that he almost hurt his sister in the past because of it. The MC adds that he has zero confidence in convincing his sisters to accept such an injustice. Amused by his early maturity, Hefried confesses he sometimes doubts if the boy was ever truly an innocent child. The father grabs a long, dark wooden box and mentions that the ring was just supposed to be a reward for his performance at the Assembly of Swords. However, slowly opening the heavy lid, the noble guesses his son will like this other reserved gift much more. The boy instantly widens his eye upon recognizing the heavy aura of the object stored inside. Resting in the box is Graham, the devouring magical weapon capable of withstanding and stabilizing even the fury of the Seven Wings. Shortly after, the two step away from the palace and walk to an isolated area in the forest to test the artifact safely. Aster asks if the dojo wouldn't be enough, but the man assures him it's much better to prevent any kind of lethal accident. Joking around, Hefried reminds him that the boy has a bad habit of destroying the property quite frequently. Holding what seems to be just the weapon's base, the leader explains that the demonic sword was recovered from the main family especially for him. With a completely focused look, the Viscount grips the relic's metal hilt tightly. The MC reacts with surprise, trying to figure out how that could be used in a deadly clash. Watching the artifact emit light particles, the young man questions how it's a sword since it has no visible blade. With a swift motion, Hefried injects his aura into the handle and creates a massive extension of scarlet energy. He explains that the weapon has infinite potential and only reaches its true form by absorbing the user's life force in combat. The raw display of strength creates a colossal pillar of energy that shoots straight up towards the forest clouds. The absolute slash tears the sky and leaves a circular trail of destruction, scattering the wind through the air. The Viscount warns that the relic has a dark reputation and can drain the life of anyone unlucky enough to have too weak a magic. Pointing the glowing handle at the MC, the father asks if he has enough guts to try wielding the danger. Without hesitating for a single second, Aster grabs the thick hilt with both hands. The boy starts transferring his own heavy aura into the relic, fully prepared to handle the kickback. In the next instant, a massive explosion of golden power sweeps through the entire forest in a shockwave. Struggling to maintain a steady stance, the MC shockingly realizes the tool is sucking his energy on its own. A gigantic beam of light shoots from the weapon straight up, lighting up the entire region like a beacon. Back at the courtyard, the knights panic, yelling that a comet or something just took off from the ground. Away from the commotion, Alphen watches the magical anomaly rising intensely on the forest horizon. Flashing a proud smile, the girl instantly concludes that her little brother is the only one responsible for that absurd flash. Kneeling on the dirt and panting, Aster laughs in relief holding the stabilized blade, acknowledging the tool is perfect for his payback. Utterly shocked, Hefried mutters that the most unbelievable part of all this is his son's absurd power. A huge pillar of energy slices the clouds as the father observes the magical relic's display of strength. The Viscount highlights that there is no historical record of anyone bearing the dreaded 7 wings in the family bloodline. He guarantees that if the young man fully masters this miracle, he will one day become an unbeatable swordsman. Staring into the void, the MC reflects on the real possibility of overcoming the ruthless Duke in the future. The leader, however, warns that carrying such a colossal power will inevitably attract a lot of conflicts. The man explains that if the truth about the wings goes public, the consequences for the house will be disastrous. Some will feel envy and resentment, while others will definitely try to use him as a political tool. The Viscount also warns that there will be those willing to eliminate the boy once and for all, considering him a major obstacle. Reaching out his hand, the father advises his adopted son to prepare so he won't regret his own weakness later on. With that, he firmly asks the heir to train hard to become as strong as possible starting right now. Squeezing the nobleman's hand, Aster promises himself that he will never again live a miserable life like his past one. Gripping the metal hilt, the boy thanks his father and assures him he will master the sword and his supreme magic. 3 days later, the leader and his wife wait in the palace's main hall to welcome those who have just arrived. At that moment, sisters Martha and Kudo return from the Night Academy and formally present themselves to the family. After clearing her throat to get everyone's attention, the short-haired warrior drops the formal posture. She opens her arms excitedly, demanding a big welcome back hug from her adorable little sisters. However, the warm welcome goes entirely to Martha, leaving the redhead knight completely ignored in the hall. Confused by the situation, the young woman asks from afar why no one came running to hug her too. One of the girls answers honestly that they avoid contact because the warrior always messes up their hair. Crossing her arms, Kudo looks away and lies that someone so refined in chivalry would never do something so rough. Right after, the newcomer spots Alfin standing further back in the main hall. Wasting no time, the redhead lunges and crushes her little sister in a tight hug to make up for lost time. As the smaller girl tries to escape complaining about the clingy attitude, the warrior rubs her face against hers without caring. Stopping the playing around suddenly, Kudo asks her parents where the adopted brother is hiding in the house. Looking out the window next to his wife, Hefried calmly points out where the boy can be found. The young woman focuses her gaze in the pointed direction, already picturing the scene she is about to witness. Far from there, a violent explosion of scarlet energy lights up the territory's dense forest. Panting, Aster continues training intensely with the devouring sword's massive strikes through the woods. Frustrated with his own performance, he laments still not having stabilized the magic the right way. The boy realizes he can form the blade of energy, but all he can do right now is suppress it. Tired from the training, he wonders how the Viscount managed to wield that relic so naturally and effortlessly. Interrupting his thoughts, Kudo appears walking through the trees, ironically praising the light show. The boy notices his sister's arrival, who immediately complains about his lack of manners for not welcoming her at the palace. Showing some irony in her voice, the warrior comments that he's acting very cold towards the family. Sitting on a rock, the young woman deduces that the fame from the Assembly of Swords has gone to the Elmheim prodigy's head. Trying to change the subject, the MC congratulates his sister for excelling in several difficult missions at the academy. He specifically mentions that she was the only rookie to receive the honorable platinum medal that year. Calmly standing up with her training weapon, Kudo states she needs that spotlight to inherit Hefried's position. With a sterner look, the girl reveals she already knows the boy turned down the talk about the house's succession. Aster denies any intention of offending her and explains he just considers himself unqualified for the role for now. The diplomatic excuse only serves to make the warrior's expression even more tense and irritated. Feeling the vibe get extremely heavy in the air, the boy takes a step back on instinct. Wielding her wooden sword, the redhead accuses her brother of being very cruel since he knows her dream very well. The sudden aggression leaves the MC paralyzed for a fraction of a second in the forest. Without any warning, the newcomer charges at high speed, leaving a trail of blue aura behind. She unleashes a brutal diagonal slash that forces the boy to retreat quickly to avoid getting sliced in half. The strike hits the ground so hard it shatters the scenery's rocks in a crushing impact. Backing away to a safe distance, Aster demands to know the reason for that sudden surprise attack out of nowhere. Ignoring the boy's indignation, the opponent announces that the time has come to test his skills after so long. Taking her combat stance, the knight firmly warns that the next attack will be for real. Desperate about the situation, the MC begs her to stop, warning that the magical relic is still incomplete. Kudo snaps back dryly, asking if he would use that same pathetic excuse if he were facing a real enemy. The cold words spoken by the warrior hits the young mage like a massive reality check. Leaping forward once again, the adversary warns that a knight must fight as if they were on the battlefield. Seeing the lightning-fast charge approach, the young man understands that the fight is no longer just a provocation. Under pressure, he can barely manage his own mana reserve while trying to react to the heavy offensive. With no way out against the opponent's lethal intent, the heir focuses his energy on the hill to survive. The boy blocks his older sister's ruthless attack, creating a violent clash between their auras in the woods. The direct clash results in a massive explosion of blue and scarlet power that sweeps away the dust and trees around them. Mid-air, Kudo praises her brother's agility for keeping up with her enhanced movements in training. However, pressing the wooden blade hard, the warrior criticizes the lame excuse involving the relic. Forcing the target back in the impact, the girl despises the fact that his magical control is a complete mess. With that, she lands quickly on the grass and already bends her legs, preparing for the next aggressive push. Sweating cold from the relentless sequence, Aster remembers that the warrior was always ruthless like this. Standing amidst the dust rising in the clearing, the short-haired young woman waits for the target's next reaction. The MC recalls the past, remembering that the simple fact he was the only male successor already caused friction. The knight never accepted that the orphan carried a superior crest, using any excuse to demand duels during childhood. In his memories, the little warrior always got the worst trying to block the brutal beatings of the Red Storm. Returning to the violent reality of combat, the boy concludes with certainty that his protector is actually his natural enemy. Admiring the successful defense, the adversary praises the young man before resuming the clash with even more drive. Giving absolutely no rest, Kudo lands a devastating vertical strike straight onto the MC's red defense. Displaying an intimidating fury, she yells that the brat has absolutely no qualification to lead the house. At the palace, Elfin watches the magical explosion from afar and worriedly asks her father if they should really leave them alone. Staring at the landscape calmly, Hefried acknowledges that this little sibling spat could very well end up tragically. Watching the fight from a distance, the Viscount calmly comments that the two make great rivals and assures her the situation won't end in disaster. Elfin shows clear concern and confesses she hopes her father is really right about that. Changing the subject, the girl questions the real reason they were called back from the academy, suspecting it wasn't just to talk about succession. Confirming his daughter's suspicions, Hefried opens a small wooden box on his desk. The young woman's eye widens, immediately recognizing the gravity of the object kept inside. The noble takes out a letter sealed with red wax, revealing it to be a direct summons from the main house. He explains that the elders in control of the Elmheim family wish to see the new adopted grandson in person. Understanding the weight of the situation, the girl agrees that this is an extremely serious problem for them. The Viscount admits in a tenser tone that, in the worst-case scenario, they might end up losing Aster for good. Meanwhile, in the forest, the violent clash between the two youths kicks up dust and destroys the surrounding environment. Blocking the attacks, the boy asks his sister to stop the madness, reminding her he already turned down the offer to lead the house. The justification only serves to irritate Kudo even more as she prepares another heavy blow. The knight brings the blade down with full force, forcing the target to focus all his defense so he isn't crushed. Pressured by the raw impact, Aster feels like he is dealing with a monster swinging a giant hammer. The weight of the attack is so massive it makes the boy's arms shake under the pressure of the charge. Taking advantage of the recoil, the warrior pushes the adversary backward in a rough slide across the ground. Trying to catch his breath, the boy begs her to finally listen to what he has to say. Interrupting his speech, Kudo flashes a provoking smile and accuses her little brother of just running away from direct combat. At that, a new explosion of aura tears through the scenery and pushes the two apart in a violent shockwave. Completely out of breath, the MC struggles to handle his older sister's absurd brute force. Wielding her training blade masterfully, the young woman decrees that simply swinging the sword is a third-rate attitude. Keeping a firm stance on the grass, she adds that focusing only on controlling one's own magic makes someone second-rate. The knight states with conviction that only by mastering the path of the demonic sword can someone be considered top-tier. Resting the weapon on her shoulder in boredom, Kudo lets out a heavy sigh and confesses to being very disappointed in the boy. She explains that the difference in crests directly reflects on the amount of power each one can handle, where a single wing changes everything. Because of this, the girl admits that her 5-wing rank loses badly in firepower to his 7-wing relic. Even with this obvious advantage, she criticizes the fact that the heir keeps running away from a straightforward test of strength. With a mocking smile, the young woman questions if he doesn't trust his own ability to reach the ideal fencing style. The warrior hits the weak spot by guessing that the opponent is afraid of losing control again, just like he did in the past. The spot-on provocation leaves the young man paralyzed for a moment, wondering if he really is afraid of his own magical miracle. Staring at his own weapon, the MC realizes he spent all this time subconsciously putting a limiter on his strength. He figures out that the relic's instability is due to the fact he's forcibly suppressing the magic instead of letting it flow freely. Unleashing a terrifying amount of blue aura, the warrior warns that the boy was born with everything she always wanted. Stepping hard on the ground, the young woman declares that if the orphan is going to waste this power, then she will take it for herself. In an aggressive and merciless advance, the opponent demands that her brother hand all that strength over to her right now. Bracing for the charge, Aster grips the metal hilt with all his firmness. The direct clash generates a massive explosion that kicks up rocks and breaks the freezing forest scenery. Impressed by the perfect block, the knight backs away, realizing her full power strike was easily repelled. Flashing a confident smile with his eyes glowing, the boy thanks his older sister for making him wake up to reality. As the young woman lands, she notices in confusion that the boy is advancing without even forming the scarlet light blade. Taking her defensive stance, Kudo is sure he didn't run out of magic after the last destructive impact. Leaping with everything, the heir readies his strike using only the handle, focused on the endless power hidden in his crest. At the exact moment of the attack, he releases all the concentrated magic at once in an absurd, lethal explosion. Struggling to hold back the kickback, the adversary immediately acknowledges that the suicidal tactic was a stroke of genius. Focused on his goal, Aster assures himself that he has absolutely no intention of wasting his second chance at living. Letting the crest glow intensely on his back, the MC decides he will no longer hesitate to use his true supreme strength. In his mind, he reflects that, in his past life, no matter how much status he gained, he felt he never truly had anything. Confused by the sudden speech, the adversary doesn't understand what second life her little brother is talking about. Giving her no time to think, Aster injects even more magic into the relic to end the fight for good. Using the momentum of his own body, the young man pressures the opponent with a relentless lethal advance. Surprised by the sudden burst, Kudo is startled by the colossal amount of energy expanding inches from her face. The warrior's wooden weapon begins to completely disintegrate upon touching the devouring blade. Promising not to hold back anymore, the boy thrusts the sword straight at his older sister's chest in a lightning-fast strike. The knight's eye widens as she feels the violent impact hit her squarely in the middle of the battlefield. Aster finishes the brutal charge in a whirlwind of scarlet light that illuminates the entire forest region. Sometime later, the short-haired warrior wakes up confused, lying in a comfortable bed. Looking at the sunlight hitting her bedroom window, she tries to figure out how she ended up back at the palace. A female voice breaks the silence, asking in a calm tone if the young woman finally woke up from her deep slumber. Near the curtain, Alphen straightens the fabric folds and comments that the newcomer slept for quite a while. Jumping up in shock, Kudo interrupts her sister to desperately ask what happened to her fencing match. With a calm smile, Alphen says that Aster himself carried her on his back to the mansion safely. The girl explains that the boy lied to the family, saying the warrior had merely passed out from exhaustion after the long trip. With her head down on the bed, Kudo mutters that this wasn't true at all. Recalling the clash, she admits that at the last second she really thought she would be sliced in half by the demonic sword. However, the young woman understands that the MC undid the magical blade a fraction of a second before the fatal impact. What knocked her out wasn't the cut, but just the heavy wave of residual magic that went through her body on collision. In her memory, the knight acknowledges that the gentle boy would never intentionally hurt one of his own sisters. Even so, his terrifying presence in that second made her genuinely believe she was going to be ended in cold blood. Showing a slight smirk, the young woman concludes that her little brother really is someone full of annoying surprises. Grabbing her training sword quickly from the floor, she demands to know where the brat is hiding right now. Determined to turn the tables, Kudo wields the weapon and warns she absolutely refuses to accept her shameful defeat. While the warrior promises to fight at full strength next time, Alphen casually points out that the target has already left home. The sudden news cuts through all the hype, leaving the defeated girl completely lost by the information. Turning towards the room, the noble explains that the patriarch and Aster just left for the main house due to an urgent summons. The shocking update catches Kudo so off guard she just stands paralyzed in silence, processing everything. At the palace, a desperate scream echoes through the window as soon as the warrior finds out the news of the sudden departure. Meanwhile, the Viscount's carriage smoothly makes its way down the city's cobblestone road. Inside the vehicle, Aster watches the scenery through the window with his serene expression during the trip. Hifrid explains they are heading to a meeting with the former leaders of the main family and its branches. The Viscount highlights that, despite being retired, these shadow rulers still hold immense influence over the House of Elmheim. Sighing in confusion, the man finds it extremely odd that the elders are demanding the boy's presence after ignoring him completely for years. Showing zero concern, the MC deduces that the sudden call is related to the events at the Sword Dance Festival. The young man brings up the rumors that the main bloodline's veterans value clan honor way more than gold or life itself. He casually mentions that anyone who soils this pride is usually thrown to the house's monsters as a brutal punishment. Surprised by the boy's chill attitude facing the threat, Hifrid immediately asks where he heard such a scary story. Aster just brushes it off with a vague gesture and assures he is fully prepared to deal with exile or even a secret execution. Worried about the heir's coldness, the patriarch changes the subject and asks if he really wanted to leave the mansion without even saying goodbye. The boy states with his head down that it was the best thing to do, recalling he already planned to leave as soon as the sisters returned anyway. He comments that his older sister always hated him, so the knight will be able to live in peace without having to deal with his unwanted presence there. Resting his hand on the training weapon, the young man acknowledges that, thanks to the brutal clash in the woods, he finally figured out how to handle the magic relic. Feeling ready for the worst, Aster asks his father not to try saving him under any circumstances from now on. Annoyed by the audacity, Hyfrid scolds the absurd idea of the family's youngest trying to play the lone hero in a wolf's den. At that, the Viscount's lectures cut short when a loud bang violently shakes the carriage's structure. The MC's eye widens in shock, feeling an extremely familiar aura approaching in an instant. Surprising the passengers, Kudo appears furiously clinging to the side of the moving cabin on the road. The young man is in disbelief, noticing that his recently awakened sister actually came running on foot all the way down the street just to catch them in time. Leaping nimbly through the window, the warrior criticizes the target's silent escape and reveals she already knows everything about the elder's urgent summons. Wasting no time, the adoptive father warns the newcomer about the serious consequences of dragging her to the main base without a formal invite. Sitting comfortably, the young woman assures him she perfectly understands her duty to protect the mansion in the leader's absence. Even aware of that, she argues that a summons of this magnitude requires the family to be on maximum alert against the imminent danger. The knight recalls her other sister's worrying words, fearing behind the scenes that the boy would find a way to disappear forever. Trying to calm things down, Aster promises he's just going to have a civil chat, although he hides the strong uncertainty about making it back alive. Cutting the fake optimism, the short-haired warrior points her finger right in the heir's face and openly declares that she despises him with all her might. She lists her frustrations, rejecting the fact that he holds the supremacy of the Seven Wings and still gets successor privileges. What pisses her off the most, however, is the adopted brat's habit of acting like a self-sufficient adult, instead of accepting his role as the youngest brother. Despite the numerous complaints, Kudo relaxes her posture and confesses that the annoying target remains a precious member of her family. Resting her head on the window with a tired look, she decrees that the boy will always be her little brother, no matter what freakish strength he acquires. The warrior states with a fixed gaze that the heir has an absolute obligation to return alive so they can have a fair rematch in the future. Oozing total confidence, the knight warns she has absolutely zero intention of letting their battle record end on that crushing defeat. With the warning given loud and clear, the girl simply turns her back and jumps out of the moving vehicle back onto the asphalt. Not understanding the point of that crazy invasion, the young man reflects on the scene while Halfreed just finds their fierce rivalry funny. Out of her sight, Aster goes back to staring out the window, feeling genuinely grateful for the sincere worry disguised as explosive anger. Watching the cobblestone streets fade behind them, the MC locks in the promise in his mind to survive at all costs and return to the mansion. After completing the long journey, the carriage finally passes through the massive iron gates surrounding the Elmheim fortress. A troop of armored soldiers greets the Viscount right away, mechanically informing him that the upper leaders are already waiting inside. Hefri dismisses the courtesy, claiming he knows the house's hallways very well, but the guard insists the orders require a mandatory escort. Surrounded by spearheads, the patriarch instantly notes that the oppressive pressure of the place feels like prisoners being led to the gallows. Unfazed by the explicit hostility, Aster walks alongside the man with his head held high. The heavy vibe of that huge castle under the stained sky triggers an uncomfortable feeling of nostalgia in the reincarnated boy's memories. Walking through the back of the building, the Viscount breaks the silence to prepare the boy to deal with the real tension waiting for them in the hall. Hefreen instructs his son not to lose his cool during the trial and to ignore whatever absurd insults the big shots throw at them. Quite tense, the patriarch states that the boy's manners aren't the problem, but rather the uncontrollable instability of those isolated rulers. While receiving the crucial instructions on how to act in front of leadership, Aster ends up getting distracted by noises coming from a nearby arena. The boy notices Darius's absence in the knight's courtyard and coldly deduces that his main hand getting crushed took him out of combat indefinitely. The secondary family leader notices his companion spacing out and strictly asks if he is actually listening to the vital warnings. Refocusing on the path, the MC puts on an innocent face and nods as if he hadn't missed a single word. The young mage swears he'll act perfectly in his answers just to make sure he keeps the promise made to his sister a few hours ago. Reaching the end of the walk, the duo comes face to face with the massive noble hall doors being pushed open by the castle sentinels. The announcer declares loudly the arrival of the Viscount and his companion for the assembly, sunk in the partial darkness of the room. Stepping into the center of the space, the newcomer hears a voice echo from the back, commenting on the decades he's been away from family duties. Hidden in the shadows, the mysterious elderly man provokes the noble by calling him "dear grandson" in a sharp, ironic tone. Immediately recognizing the supreme authority, the Viscount takes a knee on the floor, assuming maximum reverence before the seated figure. He greets the ruthless leader with extreme formal respect, correcting his own verbal slip to call him great-grandfather. Standing right beside his prostrate father, Aster intensely analyzes the elder, fully aware that this is the great monster hiding in Elmheim's shadows. Zenith assumes his spot at the top of the food chain, revealing the eye patch and a deadly gaze that proves the title of sixth ruler of the main bloodline. Sweeping the hostile room with his eyes, the MC spots the advisors and strategists who command the military force of the enemy banner. He easily notices that the elite faces present there are the same ones who cheered from the luxury seats during the sword festival. However, the young man quickly notices an anomaly in the meeting, unable to find the current Duke, Roderick, anywhere in the room. Settled in his throne, Zenith guesses the target's thoughts and points out straight away that the leader of the 8th generation didn't waste his time showing up to this reckoning. The old man grumbles that the great commander is too busy serving the crown to deal with such lowly incidents, leaving the dirty work to the old war dogs. Aster processes the scenario, understanding that in his previous incarnation he ended up getting eliminated without even getting famous enough to cross paths with this dark council. The heir also realizes that the audacity of gathering the entire army top brass behind the current Duke's back exposes the terrifying influence Zenith still holds. Interrupting the silent reflection, Hefried swallows his pride and dares to cautiously ask which incident the sixth ruler is talking about. The shadow monster lets out a raspy laugh, openly mocking the fact that the Viscount is trying to play dumb in the face of the massive scandal. Exposing the reason for the trial, Zenith angrily cites the grotesque episode of the festival where the adopted boy dared to mutilate Darius's precious talent. Confirming the exact scenario he predicted at the start of the trip, the MC just faces the situation well aware of the imminent payback for the public insult. Trying to stop the disaster, the Patriarch begs for fairness, stating that Roderick himself intervened and officially ended the dispute that same day. The nobles in charge react to the argument with blind rage, accusing the Duke's words of being pure theater and demanding compensation for the outrage suffered. Backed by his unquestionable power, the old man coldly sentences the useless adopted boy to permanent exile and promises severe physical punishment for Hefried over the general insolence. Desperate seeing his family crumble, the secondary house leader drops the submissive act and jumps up, demanding that the elder's fury fall solely on his shoulders. Surprised by his father's attitude, Aster tries to step in, warning that he had nothing to do with the incident. The Viscount just closes his eyes in silence, completely ignoring his son's warning. Seeing the determination on the man's face, the boy realizes he won't be able to make him back down. From the back of the hall, a voice scolds the youth, pointing out he lacks manners for trying to interrupt the adult's conversation. From high up on his throne, Zenith reminds them that the Elmheim family leads an overwhelming force of 12,000 knights. The old advisor explains that despite this colossal power, the warriors' minds don't always think alike. He reveals that many ambitious knights watch closely, just waiting for a chance to seize the house's supreme power. The ruler points out that naturally, some of these dangerous individuals are sitting right there in the room. Standing up, the elder states that the elite only wants peace of mind, and the boy hasn't proven he's not a threat to the family. At that, the shadow monster presses the tip of his cane against the patriarch's neck, tensing him up. Pressing the magical weapon against the noble's skin, the elderly man asks if he still remembers the past. The sixth leader coldly recalls the day he forced Roderick to tear off the Viscount's arm as punishment for failing to protect the Lord. With a bloodthirsty look, Zenith demands that Hefried make up for that failure by taking off his own adopted son's head right then and there. Faced with this cruel order, the boy simply widens his eye, overwhelmed by the tension of the moment. Keeping his stance on the floor, the adoptive father firmly refuses the order and warns that the matter is closed. The patriarch states he'd rather hand over his own life than end his son, leaving Aster completely moved. Hearing the answer of disobedience, the old leader turns his back and accepts the choice with contempt. Right after, he slams his heavy cane hard against the stone hall floor. Sentencing everyone's fate, the monster orders the execution of the Viscount, also including the wife, daughters, and the boy in the fatal punishment. Declaring the definitive end of the secondary house, Zenith commands the attack, and the knights charge with their swords against the duo. Surrounded by enemy blades, the adoptive father quickly draws his weapon to try and protect his family. But the MC steps up and asks why the great-grandfather is so terrified. Bothered by the sudden boldness, the commander stops and looks over his shoulder, not getting the provocation. The young man mocks the pathetic adult behavior of gathering up terrified, scared of getting bitten by their own dog. Tearing his own shirt open, the boy warns he'd take any punishment quietly unless they threatened his family. Behind him, Hefried is paralyzed with shock seeing the boy's extreme attitude in front of the war council. Unleashing a wave of energy that blows his clothes away, Aster apologizes to his father and admits he is terrible at staying quiet. The brutal impact of the magical aura makes the armored soldiers step back in cold sweat at the sight. On the boy's skin, the immense and legendary scarlet mark of the 7 wings begins to glow intensely to everyone's shock. Wrapped in a whirlwind of destructive light, he decrees that if they touch the Viscounty, that supreme power will obliterate the entire main bloodline. Facing his demise head-on, the heir challenges the supreme leader to think very carefully about what he's going to do next. Zenith turns his whole body around, completely in disbelief as he recognizes the unreachable crest engraved on the brat's back. The other elders start sweating cold and desperately wonder if the mark is fake, since it hasn't appeared on a human in centuries. Even amidst the general panic, Count Maze admits that that monstrous energy is genuine. Breaking the tense silence, the shadow monster catches the boy's attention with a heavy voice. Without taking his eyes off the emblem, the old man asks if the adopted youth has any real idea of what that mark means to the world. Flaunting total confidence, the MC simply answers that he knows the more wings there are, the more people get scared. The mocking answer in the middle of a deadly trial makes the suited count burst out laughing hysterically in his chair. Wiping a tear from the corner of his eye, the man apologizes for the interruption and tells them to carry on with the trial. Taking the floor again, the 6th ruler explains that the crest is a magic-generating organ granted by spirits in ancient times. He continues the lesson, detailing that the ancient power was passed down from generation to generation by noble bloodlines. Through this continuous process, humanity managed to refine and deepen its magical strength to its current limits. However, the leader points out that no one in history ever reached the 7th wing except the ancient spiritual clan itself. Already out of patience for the history lesson, the young man asks sharply if the old man is hinting that he is an ancient spirit. Ignoring the impatience, the patriarch warns that if the monstrous power shown there is indeed real, things change. Behind the rebel heir, Hefried stays quiet, trying to process the absurd turn the sentencing just took. Taking a firm step forward, Aster ignores any theory about his past and locks in that he's just a son of the Viscounty. The mage declares that his bloodline doesn't matter and demands to know right now if the brass is going to make an enemy out of him. He points out that even facing exile, several other elite military families would end someone just to welcome his supreme strength. With a predatory look, the youth asserts that he would become a massive threat upon surpassing Duke Roderick himself. The audacity of comparing his power to the current main family leaders leaves the advisors in shock. The boy predicts that his survival outside the house would inevitably result in a colossal civil war that would destroy the country. Pointing to his own glowing chest, he demands they decide right there in the hall who will be on his side and who will be wiped out. Annoyed by the massive arrogance, the old man pushes back, asking if the kid really thinks he's worth that much. The shadow monster coldly argues there's still no proof that the flames on his back are legit. Showing pure mockery, the MC challenges the elders to try taking him out right now if they doubt his capability so much. Returning the fury in the same tone, the one-eyed monster promises that a direct clash in that hall would kick off the war mentioned. Gripping his cane handle tightly, the old man acknowledges that the boy has enough power to easily annihilate him in an instant. At that, the sound of a finger snap echoes suddenly, cutting through the deadly tension between the two. Standing up calmly from his chair, the blue-haired count comments that this threatening argument won't lead anywhere. Taking charge of the council, the man suggests the best way out is to give the arrogant youth a deadly challenge. One of the veterans tries to scold him for the absurd idea, but the count shoots back, pointing out everyone there is dying to see the mark's real strength. Keeping his chill vibe, the noble concludes the group can decide the doomed boy's fate after he tries to survive. Turning to the ruler, the suited man deduces that the continent's biggest martial clan must have perfect arenas for bloodthirsty tests. Watching that advisor's flawless manipulation, the mage memorizes Maze's name with a lot of tactical interest. In his analytical mind, the MC comes to the immediate conclusion that this man just revealed himself as a valuable ally. Convinced by the challenge's logic, the ruthless great-grandfather taps his cane and orders the adopted boy to follow him immediately. Walking right past the heir, the elder grumbles that dishing out a lethal correction to a cheeky grandson is also part of family duties. The group arrives at a massive iron passageway that opens up, revealing a dark, scary abyss right below. This area deep in the castle works as a huge underground bunker connected straight to the sewer system. Staring into the pitch black, the elderly man reports that the place was built for evacuations, but ended up becoming the perfect den to lock away a rampaging beast. Next to the trench, the Viscount scolds the boy quietly, reminding him he warned him multiple times to never reveal the mark recklessly. Far from feeling fear, the mage assures his father he couldn't hide the trump card forever and considers this the perfect chance to test it. Accepting the irreversible decision, the patriarch begs him not to drop his guard down there under any circumstances. Holding tight to the iron chains, the boy jumps eagerly into the depths of the abyss, ready for the slaughter. Watching the boy fall through the grates, Maze keeps a look of deep curiosity about what's going to happen. Down below, the MC lands softly in the water and notices the place is pitch black. However, his eyes take on a golden glow as he warns that the darkness isn't enough to blind him. Right after, he focuses his vision, noticing something moving in the deep shadows. Looking up at the light coming from the grate high above, the young man remembers the leader gave Darius the chance to clear his name. He recalls the cousin just stood crying so pathetically it was almost pitiful to watch. At that, heavy footsteps echo through the water as the silhouette of a colossal beast approaches. Gripping a sword handle tightly, the mage provokes the creature, asking not to be disappointed in combat. A monstrous lion with blue flames leaps roaring furiously as Aster declares the start of the trial. Standing before the monster, he realizes the rumors about the family hiding a magical beast were completely true. The young man even feels a slight empathy for the spoiled cousin for being born in a clan infested with beasts like that. Wasting no time, the gigantic animal charges at high speed, firing continuous attacks off the walls. High above, the advisors are startled by the sudden brutality of the attack in the pit. But the heir dodges easily and comments that he's way more afraid of his sister Kudo than of that thing. Furious about the dodge, the creature leaps at him again, trying to tear him apart with its claws. Mid-fight, the boy's look suddenly changes upon noticing a bizarre detail on the beast. The monster's skin reveals several skulls and souls trapped in its rotting flesh. With the creature roaring right in his face, he finally realizes he's dealing with the undead. Terrified by the discovery, Hyfried yells, asking why on earth they keep a freak like that in the basement. Showing pure evil in his eyes, the patriarch calmly answers that the beast loves the smell of decay. The old man explains he brought it out of there to devour the house's fallen bodies since it's immortal against cuts and fire. He even brags that the beast became the perfect solution to make the main family's unwanted bodies vanish. Concerned, one of the blonde advisors points out that an undead is an absurd challenge even for experienced knights. The man questions if the leader's real intention is simply to eliminate the bearer of the 7 wings right there with no chance to defend himself. Deep in the pit, the boy keeps listening closely to the entire discussion. Taking the floor again, Zenith decrees that if the young man perishes, it's because the crest's power was nothing but a useless fake. On the other side of the grate, the blue-haired count just lets out a quiet laugh at the extreme situation. In his mind, Maze hopes the boy doesn't lose his life so easily after showing so much potential. While the adults talk, the monster fires continuous blasts of energy at the boy below. Deflecting the charge, Aster concludes that standard physical attacks are completely useless against that thing. Sizing up the enemy, the MC realizes this beast's regeneration far exceeds that of any common undead. Staring at the beast, he tries to quickly recall the right way to put an end to that kind of creature for good. Logic dictates he would need to purify using sunlight, absolute flames, or weapons based in holy magic. The problem is the boy has none of that on hand, making a direct clash a huge mistake due to the lack of options. Oozing full confidence, he warns that backing down isn't an option, and tricks don't matter to someone who has the 7 wings. Channeling an absurd amount of aura, the heir decides it's the exact moment to show his true worth. The handle generates a colossal red blade, and the boy delivers a crushing blow to flatten the freak. The deafening impact of the demonic sword hitting the ground kicks up a thick dust cloud and wrecks the pit floor. Up top, the absurd magical pressure blows the blonde advisor back, leaving everyone amazed by the brute force. Clinging to the grates, the other nobles stare at the destruction, wondering if the beast is finally beaten. Showing zero reaction, the shadow monster keeps watching the outcome of the attack coldly. When the smoke clears a bit, the mage is seen in the middle of the crater holding his own arm after the effort. Evaluating the scene, the patriarch shakes his head and mutters that the boy was a disappointment in the end. Suddenly, the beast emerges completely unharmed from the rubble and charges at max speed through the air. With no time to dodge, the MC takes a direct hit that throws him violently to the ground. Giving no chance to recover, the ghost lion takes a massive leap with its jaws open ready to devour him. Seeing his son about to be torn apart, Hyfried screams his name in total despair, pounding against the grate. Promptly, the blue count steps in front of the adoptive father, warning him not to do something stupid like trying to interfere. Completely frantic, the Viscount asks if the man expects him to just stand there and watch his boy fall. Keeping his usual chill, Maze just asks him to pay attention to how the combat plays out. The advisor points out that the cheeky youth clearly still has an ace up his sleeve for this situation. During the fall, the MC gets hyped noticing his risky tactic is taking a toll on the creature. The beast hits the ground engulfed in scarlet flames, and the mage notices it shrunk quite a bit. Aster's aura overflows uncontrollably as he absorbs the beast's vitality with the demonic sword. Taking advantage of the gap from the fall, he comes down hard and drives the glowing blade right into the weakened monster's back. Flaunting cruelty, the boy warns he'll repeat that same piercing process until the freak vanishes for good. He twists the weapon ruthlessly, creating a vortex of destructive magic that starts disintegrating the target. Watching the scene, Heffried freezes, recognizing the same terrifying technique his son only used once in the past. The impact of the attack generates a tornado of red energy so dense it swallows the beast whole in an instant. The crushing pressure of the power pillar makes the structure give way, and the nobles panic as the balcony floor collapses. Scrambling to get away from the edge, the elders yell at each other as the stone floor completely crumbles. Standing amid the chaos, the patriarch finally widens his eyes, understanding the true magnitude of that phenomenon in front of him. Flexing pure arrogance inside the whirlwind of flames, Aster displays the full calamity of the Seven Wings' power. Once the magical storm settles, the fallen advisors try to figure out what just devastated the place. Staring into the depths in shock, one of the guards asks where the undead lion went in the end. Analyzing the damage, Zenith deduces the boy simply crushed the immortal monster until absolutely nothing was left. He admits that erasing a creature like that by swallowing it in a magical vortex isn't something just anyone can pull off. Resting the sword on his shoulder, the MC takes a deep breath while the old man concludes he won using purely brute force. Riding the general shock, Maze approaches the supreme ruler and asks if that was also part of the plan. Beside them, Hyfried regains his posture, feeling immense pride in the absurd growth his adopted son achieved. Straight to the point, the blue-haired count asks if the youth finally passed the deadly test set by the council. With a look of disdain, the monster decrees it would be impossible for anyone there to object after that massacre. Confirming the victory, Maze calls out loud and clear to the boy in the pit that he passed the exam. Standing in the middle of the crater he made himself, Aster hears the order to come up quickly, but explains he broke the chains. Looking up with an innocent face, the heir asks if someone could do him a solid and toss a rope down for him to get out. Leaning against the window, the advisor questions if the boy is really sure about that risky decision. Facing the patriarch, the MC confirms and states he has no interest in the family's succession war. He doubles down that his place is in the Viscounty, but the old man lets out a laugh, doubting this supposed humility. Looking the boy closely, the leader claims it's impossible to hide the strong ambition reflecting in his eyes. Cutting to the chase, he deduces the heir's ultimate goal is to turn his blade against the clan in the future. Surprised, the boy gets startled when the ruler asks if Roderick's head is his target. Right after, the elder tells him to relax and assures he doesn't plan on investigating his real motives right now. Aster doesn't get the sudden tolerance and asks why the rebels aren't treated as enemies. Keeping a relaxed posture, the leader answers that the family group isn't nearly as united as people think. He comments that Roderick got too stubborn, so he agrees to use the boy as an obstacle to slow the Duke down. Turning his back to leave, the mage walks away internally, recognizing that the ruler is a true monster. Outside, the noble asks how the talk went and hears that the integration invite was turned down in the end. The advisor shows complete surprise at the unexpected response regarding the rejection of the main offer. With his hands on his hips, he just sighs and comments that this decision is a real shame. He promises the boy's life would be better inside, but is cut off when Aster calls him by the title of Count. Straight up, the boy asks the reason for getting help in the arena, but the ally plays dumb. Staring at the MC, the noble confesses he just felt like teasing a cheeky brat. Changing the subject, the advisor puts an arm around the heir's shoulders to congratulate him on the earned title. With a conspiratorial tone, he asks the youth to pay close attention to the people present in the hall. In the corners, several big shots whisper with hostility about the need to recruit or eliminate the mage quickly. Resuming the walk, the director explains that carrying the legendary magical mark attracts an insane number of opportunists. Catching the tactical warning, the boy questions if the man beside him is also just another one of those users. Without dropping his elegant vibe, Maze listens to the blunt suspicion without showing any negative reaction. He reveals his position at the Knight Academy and admits that securing promising youths is part of his job. Pointing discreetly, he shows that Viscount Hyfried is also using the moment to make alliances. Saying goodbye in a friendly way, the recruiter lets him know he expects to see the boy enrolled in his institution. Watching the advisor leave, The heir concludes it's too early to consider him a fully trustworthy ally. At that, his adoptive father gently touches his shoulder and suggests they finally start the trip back home. Overflowing with pride, the Viscounty leader says he can't wait to tell the girls all the details of the victory. The boy laughs and agrees, already imagining his mother's panic when she sees the state of his clothes ripped from the fight. Somewhere else, a knight takes a knee as he is called to account for Darius's demise during the trial. Sitting on the throne, Roderick ignores his own son's tragic fate and only asks about the adopted boy's situation. The subordinate is outraged by the father's coldness, but swallows it down and states he has a full report on the matter. Interlocking his fingers, the Duke figures out on his own the supreme power of the Seven Wings really awakened in the enemy. The armored lackey goes into shock, realizing the master already suspected that magical anomaly. In his mind, the leader pictures the boy as an absurd force capable of destabilizing Elmheim's entire balance of power. Fearing a lethal uprising in the future, the knight asks if it wouldn't be better to take some drastic action immediately. Showing zero concern, the tyrant firmly orders that no one lay a finger on the enemy heir. He argues that if the clan were to fall apart because of a mere child's obstacle, it would have ceased to exist a long time ago. Flaunting a dark confidence, the ruler decrees that all that uncontrollable power will be his sooner or later. Until the right time comes, he prefers to entertain himself watching the baby he let escape fight for his own survival. The memory of the bloody massacre in the snow forest resurfaces like a macabre trophy kept from the past. With a look loaded with evil, Roderick murmurs the victim's original name, recognizing that Ash has returned. 4 years go by and a crowd of youngsters gathers in front of the entrance exam for the dreamed Knight Academy. At the busy reception, the proctors guide the candidates to move forward quickly once they finish the paperwork. Walking calmly across the courtyard, the MC catches their attention and the other rookies start whispering gossip. The guys around doubt his identity, commenting that the famous prodigy should be way more muscular. At the registration desk, the signed document makes it clear the institution takes no responsibility for fatal accidents in the exam. Wasting no time, the staff crosses his arms and demands the candidate present his magical mark on the spot. Checking the registration clipboard, the examiner's eyes pop upon recognizing the famous last name of the military family. The man gulps, realizing he's evaluating the youth who became the target of the continent's biggest rumors. With an ironic smile, Aster warns that his emblem is in a tricky spot to show in public. Oozing confidence, he runs a hand through his hair and jokingly asks if his own face isn't enough for approval. The arena's gigantic iron gate stands tall on the horizon, surrounded by a massive crowd of eager warriors. Halfway there, a rookie candidate raises his voice telling the heir to stop walking immediately. The mage calmly turns his head and listens to the guy point his finger, accusing him of having too cocky of a look. The aggressor makes fun of the boy's noble origin, hinting that a hick like him got in the completely wrong line. Pointing to the crest on the wall, the brute tries to give a moral lesson, stating that only the absolute elite gets in there. Unfazed by the cheap shot, the heir neutrally agrees and simply turns his back to the threat. Mad about being totally ignored, the big guy tries to block his path, yelling about the group's heavy training. Smites points to the boy's waist and mocks his short weapon, angrily calling him a fake swordsman. Wanting to start trouble at all costs, the aggressor tells the newcomer to turn around and go home if he just wants to take a stroll. Watching the commotion from a distance, other candidates lament that the guy keeps picking on the freshman for no reason. His buddy agrees but highlights that the real mistake was trying to bully the spooky kid from the Elmheim family of all people. Before the fight escalates, a familiar voice from the back interrupts the mess, calling out the title of the Seven Wings. A well-dressed guy approaches the commotion, celebrating the unexpected reunion with his dear blood relative. Instantly recognizing the annoying tone of voice, the MC shoots a look loaded with deadly boredom and disgust. Doing a theatrical bow, the red-haired noble introduces himself as Grion and oozes phoniness as he says he missed his cousin. With a cynical smile, he justifies using the word familiar only because the boy's birth origins are unknown. Not taking the bait on the insult, Aster just laments in a dry and ironic way about Darius's violent downfall in the past. Far from feeling sad, the enemy declares it was a real relief seeing that loser lose his life in the shadows. He admits with total coldness that dealing with the fallen allies' arrogance was already becoming an unbearable annoyance. Closing the distance, the lackey mockingly states he doesn't believe a single word of the rumor about the divine power. Drastically changing his expression, he whispers a lethal threat, reminding the heir he won't have his dad's protection in there. Standing clear of that fatal tension, the other competitors predict a bloodbath, seeing two clan big shots in the same arena. Observing the tension at the test site, the other candidates comment that the main family and the branches still hate each other, choosing not to get involved in this mess. At that, An armed guy steps up hesitantly and asks if the boy in black belongs to the dreaded Elmheim bloodline. Without showing much emotion, the heir of the Seven Wings just stares at the newcomer coldly, purposely crashing the conversation. Green sports a look loaded with phoniness and cynicism. Staying chill, the MC ignores the provoking tone and answers in a friendly way that the rookie can just call him Aster. The scene shifts to the vast courtyard of the first exam, where the instructor's voice echoes welcoming everyone and thanking the participants for their courage. The officer shouts with absolute firmness that the warriors of that academy serve and protect the king with their own lives. He warns the candidates that they are glorious swords, emphasizing that the kingdom doesn't need blunt, foolish blades on the battlefield. Walking towards a massive tower, the crowd hears the final order to treat this test like a real war and show their true worth. In the middle of the group, Aster thinks that whole speech is ridiculous, but internally acknowledges he finally managed to get back to this place. The mage reflects that the path to becoming a royal knight was never an option when he had no magic in his past life. He knows that beyond this initial challenge lies the man who rules the very top, Supreme Commander Roderick. Focused on his lethal goal, the boy mentally warns the villain to wait, as he will soon reach the clan leader. However, to get to the Patriarch, he admits the first mandatory step is surviving that rigorous selection exam. With all candidates gathered at the base of the arena, the instructor declares the brutal test's immediate start, giving no room to prep. Without any warning, a hail of deadly arrows is fired from the walls, striking right into one of the participants' heads. The guy's body falls lifeless to the ground in a fraction of a second, marking in a bloody way the start of the dreaded tower trial. The examiner coldly announces that only those who stay standing until the end of the massacre will be considered the winners. In total panic, the rookies start getting taken down by the projectiles and scream, not knowing how to defend against such a dense attack. Confusion takes over the area as some run stumbling, warning that everyone will fall if they just stand in the middle of the crossfire. Trying to survive, a group of warriors forms a defensive circle and starts deflecting the blades with a lot of physical effort. Watching from up high, the instructor notes that the veterans who failed before already knew the drill and managed to organize as a team. Even with this co-op tactic, the proctor acknowledges that the survival rate for this first stage never goes over 30%. He concludes that such basic, desperate defenses will soon fail against the absurd volume of continuous shots from the traps. The test's real goal is assessing instinctual response capability, something Greyon shows by deflecting attacks with pinpoint accuracy. The Academy is exactly looking for the overwhelming resolution power that only prodigies carrying magical crests can achieve under pressure. Struggling to protect himself from the non-stop attack, Smots looks back and sees the MC standing still, thinking the boy froze in fear. The red-haired noble throws a mean jab, wishing his hated cousin becomes an easy target and gets peppered right there in the arena. Completely ignoring the trash talk around him, Aster finally grabs his relic's metal hilt calmly. In an explosive move, he projects a gigantic scarlet energy blade and spins his body, creating a massive air displacement. The Brood and the other candidates freeze, completely seeing the absurd display of power that just happened. Engulfed in a whirlwind of pure destructive aura, the air strikes a threatening pose and dares the tower to throw everything it's got at him. The windstorm generated by the magic is so intense it creates an impenetrable barrier, bouncing all the steel projectiles away. Huddled on the ground to avoid certain doom, the survivors stare at the red tornado in panic, asking what kind of monster that is. Completely sweaty and scared, Smites realizes that not a single arrow can even scratch the isolated target in the middle of the field. From above, the examiner is stunned by the unmatched level of manipulation used to create that perfect defensive air current. The instructor mutters in fascination that the rookie boy seems to be literally wrapped in an unforgiving storm of pure magic. Shortly after, the firing finally stops, and the warriors start to slowly stand up, trying to figure out if the nightmare is over. Scanning the wrecked courtyard, the officer notices more people survive than he expected due to the collateral protection generated by Aster. With an upbeat tone that ignores the carnage, he congratulates the rookies for holding out and tells them to look at the fallen bodies scattered around. The man officially declares that all those still breathing on their feet have passed the Academy's first elimination phase. Giving not a single minute of physical rest, the leader orders the survivors to follow him immediately to the next challenge area. Walking through the castle's inner hallways, one of the participants grumbles quietly about the examiner's ruthless rush. Next to Aster, the friendly buddy comments on the extreme exhaustion the rain of arrows caused and asks if the youth is feeling the fatigue yet. Intrigued by the MC's flawless posture, he questions how the guy can walk so casually after burning so much energy. Keeping watch from a distance, the Academy's proctor keeps tracking the strongest candidate's footsteps and breathing. He is fascinated to see that the owner of the 7 wings unleashed a brutal amount of mana without showing a single sign of burnout. In another part of the courtyard, Grion struts with superiority, followed closely by his subordinates from other lesser houses. The red-haired noble's mind flashes back to a recent memory where an elderly advisor cashes in a major favor with a warning tone. The order received from the shadows was to block the heir's approval at any cost so as not to ruin the future laid out by Roderick. Arriving at the new area, the instructor hands out standard blades and forces everyone to switch weapons to ensure combat balance. The friendly guy from the Barney complains about the bureaucratic rule while taking his new gear from the institution staff's hands. Checking a loner blade, he comments it doesn't make much difference, since these iron swords are pretty common in the army. Turning to the heir, the buddy guesses the sudden rule change was a way to nerf the boy's bizarre weapon. Holding just the deactivated metal hilt, the mage shoots a calm look and neither confirms nor denies his partner's theory. Crashing their downtime, Grion walks up doing a slow, sarcastic clap and praises his cousin for already recruiting new lackeys in line. The buddy acts outraged by the uncalled for insult and Smite steps in front of his boss to intimidate, recognizing the boy's lower origins. The big guy threatens the youth, warning that a hick noble will regret making the mistake of following the wrong master in there. Sweating cold with fear, the young baron stutters, desperately claiming he has zero interest in teaming up with the newbie in black. Curing the cowardly and pathetic betrayal, Aster sees through everyone's phoniness and feels the vibe of the place become unbearable. Without stooping to the level of the useless argument, the MC turns his head and realizes just how much all this fake crap makes him sick. Cutting the fight short, the proctor gets everyone's attention to explain the second test will be a military simulation split into 3 teams. The goal of the direct clash will be fighting for control of marked bases in the middle of the dense forest's uneven terrain. He explains control is claimed by raising the flag on the area's flagpole, and stealing or destroying enemy poles is strictly forbidden. Aside from that rule, the examiner guarantees there are no moral limits, encouraging them to slash and eliminate without mercy any obstacle in their way. Holding 3 colored armbands in his hands, the leader announces he'll reveal right now who will be in each tournament faction. Tying red bands on their arms, Grion and his allies group up, flexing totally confident postures about the draw. Across the arena, fate sticks Aster and the blue team, paired exactly with the scared Baron guy who had rejected him. As soon as the signal smoke goes up, the instructor announces the carnage of the second stage has officially begun. Adjusting his gloves, the mage logically deduces they'll need to hold at least 2 of the 3 territories if they want a group win. The cowardly buddy realizes the game's lethal math and panics, confirming that only one of the 3 teams will walk out of the forest approved. Terrified by being outnumbered, the youth whines that this means they'll cross blades with influential Grion's faction. Aster just raises an eyebrow in confusion, not getting the reason for so much fuss over an arrogant coward from the main house. Backing up with a trembling body, the rookie warns the heir that the real problem with facing rich nobles isn't their raw strength. The brown-haired guy confesses the average candidate's biggest terror is suffering the clan's ruthless payback if they humiliate them in the arena. The scared guy keeps venting, explaining that pointing a sword at the young master of the main house means ruining his own career as a knight. He brings up the terror of that bloodline, warning that in the worst-case scenario, the offender's entire family ends up getting brutally massacred. Without hope, the rookie asks if his buddy is going to drop out of the exam, justifying that running away now is way better than throwing their lives away. Looking down, the young baron mutters that an absurd talent like him would probably never understand how the weaker ones truly feel. Minutes later, Aster runs through the forest alone, finding it ironic he ended up totally isolated in the middle of a test that was supposed to be team-based. He understands it's no surprise, since he forgot the Elmheim family is seen as a bunch of cruel tyrants, and Grion is living proof of that. The memory of the boy admitting his weakness echoes in the heir's mind as he moves across the test terrain. With that, the MC finds the situation funny, deducing that to the rest of the participants he is just another monster of that bloodline to be avoided. Arriving at the castle ruins, the mage notices the environment is way too quiet and finds it weird no one is fighting yet. He hides behind a wall, trying to figure out if the other teams are just being overly cautious or setting up an ambush. At that, a voice from above breaks the silence, making fun of the fact the rookie had the guts to show up there totally alone. Out in the open courtyard, a blonde guy stares at the MC from a distance and comments that everything is going exactly as predicted earlier. Confused by the sudden statement, the owner of the 7 wings repeats the word, trying to find out who the enemy is talking about. The opponent finishes tying a band on his arm and admits he was starting to get bored waiting so long. Tossing a piece of yellow cloth on the ground, the guy calls the mage out for a fight, wanting to see right away what he's made of. Seeing the fabric tossed to the wind, the MC quickly realizes something is very wrong with that turf war. He firmly asks what that attitude really means, since the rules split everyone into clearly defined rival groups. Far away, members of the other teams start walking together, showing they drop their rivalries to hunt a single target. Leading the march, Grion flexes a confident stance and claims he's going to teach his cousin how the true main house fights to win. The rules of the siege battle demanded territorial control, but the reality on the field quickly turned into a rigged plot. Knowing he needs to capture bases to pass, Aster pumps his mana into the hilt and summons the massive scarlet energy blade in his hand. He charges hard, remembering that raising the enemy flag is the absolute condition of the test, and therefore demands immediate explanations from his opponent. Without stopping his deadly push, the heir bluntly asks if the blonde guy shouldn't be defending the tournament's yellow faction. Bothered by the blatant cheating, he demands to know why the heck the rookie is wearing the red color belonging to Grion's squad. Drawing his own Aurelid sword, Christopher Nolan calmly replies that he formed a closed alliance with the nobles. The guy is the prodigy heir of the Nolan family and bearer of 5 wings, widely recognized for his refined skill in court fencing. Watching the duel from atop the wall, Director Mays remembers that boy was one of the only ones to breeze through the arrow test without hesitation. The brutal clash between the blades creates a massive shockwave in the courtyard, proving the absurd level of the 2 elite competitors going head-to-head. Impressed by the exchange of blows, the examiner acknowledges they are both rare rough gems that the elite academy needs to recruit and polish. Keeping up the heavy pressure on the attack, Aster repeats the word alliance in a mocking tone, finding that co-op tactic a bad joke. The MC presses his blade and questions the blonde's logic, warning that at the end of the day only one group will walk out of the arena with a real win. Nolan naturally confirms the rule, revealing he already decided to give up his spot to make sure the main house's team wins the test. While the other bases are taken over without resistance, Aster puts the pieces together and concludes his cousin used the bloodline sphere to force a general surrender. He remembers the warning about never challenging the big shots and realizes Grion used heavy blackmail to control participants from all factions. Getting back into an offensive stance, the 5-wing heir justifies his cowardly choice, saying nobody would throw themselves in front of a speeding carriage. He steps forward firmly in the courtyard, highlighting that the knight's world was always shaped by an extremely rigid and cruel power hierarchy. Landing a violent top-down strike, the opponent yells that kneeling to the strongest is the natural behavior expected from nobility. Taking the hit squarely, the mage narrows his eyes, sensing something is very wrong with his metal handle jamming during the block. He thinks back to the moment he got his mandatory gear from the staff, suspecting they handed him a purposely defective piece. Ignoring the obvious flaw in his rival's weapon, Nolan promises to keep the fight strictly one-on-one, confessing he can't stand the Elmheim's attitude either. Putting even more brute force into his sword, he reveals what's really bothering him, saying he hates show-offs trying to steal all the spotlight in the exam. The prolonged clash between the 2 weapons hits its critical limit, throwing intense sparks that push the physical resistance of the MC's relic to the extreme. Unable to handle the pressure stacked with the part's intentional defect, the metal completely cracks and the scarlet energy blade just vanishes into thin air. Without the magic barrier to cushion the blonde's heavy blow, the boy is sent flying backward, dragging his feet through the dirt of the yard to keep from falling helplessly. The noble lowers his weapon for a split second and lets out a sound of genuine confusion, seeing his opponent's gear suddenly break down mid-fight. Seeing the target suddenly dip out of the clash zone, the blonde adversary yells in anger, asking if the heir is bailing on the fight halfway through. Without even looking back, Aster runs at full speed and warns he'll deal with him later, as he just found out who he really needs to settle the score with. Left alone in the dusty courtyard, Nolan sheathes his weapon, thinking he scared the kid, and mutters that running away like a coward is a disgrace for knights. However, he looks down, noticing something metallic weirdly tossed on the ground, right near where the massive magical clash had happened. Picking up the shattered pieces of the handle, the noble notes the trashy quality of the material and realizes it wasn't his technique that ended the duel. Realizing the whole cowardly conspiracy set up by the main house to sabotage the test, he tosses the piece away, totally bummed out by the dirty politics. Sprinting back to the blue base, the MC stumbles upon a scene of total invasion and destruction where his own flag should have been flying. Standing right there, surrounded by goons, Rian comments that his cousin arrived earlier than expected and figures the blonde's ambush didn't do much good. Sitting pretty on the stone wall, the villain mocks the situation, recalling Nolan's confident promise to hold the lethal target on his own. Flexing a superior pose, he points around and brags that his group just captured the 3rd base, securing absolute domination of the test. Ignoring the stupid point tally, The owner of the Seven Wings focuses entirely on the lackey with deep hatred and coldly says the enemy's name. Gripping what's left of his sabotaged weapon, the boy demands to know right now what that suited coward did to his blue team members. The red-haired noble stays quiet for a split second, staring down his cousin's deadly fury without showing a single ounce of regret for the dirty raid. He turns his head, pretending to think about it, and starts answering the taunt with a tone dripping in pure phoniness and annoying irony. Showing off the actual army of traitors huddled behind him, Grion cynically asks the mage not to hold a grudge over the rigged massacre he set up. The young baron is pinned down by bigger goons, crying in terror while justifying he could never stay allied with an enemy of the main house. Laughing at the pathetic scene, Grion brags to his cousin that the entire base obediently bowed their heads and didn't put up an ounce of resistance. The lackey points to the controlled crowd and mocks, saying even those useless hicks had the basic common sense to pick the stronger and more influential side. Raising his fingers in a preachy and annoying way, he informs the heir that the result is already totally locked in his favor and declares victory is a wrap. Looking at the red pennants on the poles, the noble recalls the rule that keeping 2 conquered areas under control until time's up is all it takes to pass. He rubs the rival's massive numbers disadvantage in his face, guaranteeing that even if the boy runs around frantically planting flags, it won't change the game. Pointing at the enemy fabric thrown on the floor, the coward points out that Aster is flying solo and doesn't have the manpower to stand guard and defend the areas. Breaking down the math of the plan, he warns that all they have to do is wait for his cousin to leave a base so the team can go in and tear down his pole behind his back again. Making a sarcastic hand gesture, the enemy declares the cat-and-mouse game will inevitably end with the absolute win of the squad backed by Roderick. Keeping a face loaded with focused rage, the MC takes a decisive step forward and promises he will make that whole predictable strategy fail miserably. With his eyes shining with dangerous energy, he reveals his bloody resolution and warns that the problem will be solved by chopping everyone present to pieces. Hearing the demise sentence, the troop of deserters steps back in fear, feeling the vibe of the place shift drastically in front of the cornered prodigy. Trying to hide his discomfort, Grian masks his initial nervousness and accuses the opponent of just throwing out a useless bluff to try and intimidate their numbers. He focuses his stare on the boy's hand and throws in his face that the broken sword doesn't work anymore, wiping out any miracle edge the famous Seven Wings could offer. Using the bought-out battalion as his personal shield, the lackey throws his arms wide cockily and dares the disabled heir to try and take on the whole group head-on. Eyeing the wrecked weapon in his rival's hand, Grion cracks a confident smile and points out that this is a major problem. He keeps up the mocking tone and confesses he's genuinely impressed by the boy's useless stubbornness. Unfazed by the taunts, the owner of the Seven Wings calmly raises the cracked handle high. Thinking his cousin had already given up, the red-haired lackey praises his reasoning skills for realizing his own disadvantage. With his eyes gleaming with pure arrogance, the villain celebrates in his head, believing the absolute win is already in the bag. Meanwhile, the shards of the sabotage blade remain scattered on the dusty floor of the courtyard. However, the MC's gaze changes drastically, emitting an intimidating light of pure magical energy. Gripping the metal scrap tight, the boy stares down the enemy army while listening to his cousin keep running his mouth non-stop. The main house's heir keeps his triumphant look, blinded by the fake sense of outnumbering his foe. At that exact moment, the metal piece in the mage's hands reacts violently to the mana injected by his aura. Defying the laws of physics, Aster summons a colossal scarlet energy blade that lights up the entire battlefield. Caught completely off guard by the blast of power, the lackey's eyes bulge and he lets out a groan of pure dread. Seizing the opponent's shock, the prodigy heir leaps high into the air wielding the demonic relic with ease. Desperate in the face of the lethal threat, the redhead raises his own sword, trying to throw up a last-minute block so he doesn't perish. With a ruthless swing, the boy brings down the heavy blade and fires a massive shockwave that sweeps everyone on the ground. The impact of the blow tosses the traitors away like rag dolls, leaving the ambush leader completely paralyzed with fear. Landing smoothly on top of the stone wall, the owner of the Seven Wings checks out the destruction his deadly charge caused. Pointing the glowing weapon down, he warns that the red-haired lackey's overconfidence was the real reason for his crushing defeat. Shaking at the sight of the absurd display of strength, the villain gulps and curses his own cousin, calling him a monster. Leaving no room for anyone else's panic, the MC launches another devastating attack, cutting through the wind, tearing everything up. Right after throwing the strike, he jumps off the high structure as the cowardly lackey turns his back to run from the danger. Running for his life, Grian can't comprehend how the boy can cross such huge distances floating through the air. Tracking the target closely, the prodigy coldly states that the enemy's reaction speed is way too slow for a real fight. With a swift, precise slash to the back, he hits the opponent dead on, pulling a muffled scream of pain and despair. As the enemy drops, the mage vividly remembers the day he floated for the first time when he was just a little baby. Falling towards his wounded cousin, he thinks about how living an entire life without magic makes him feel the absolute power of this energy even more. Landing heavily on the courtyard ground, the heir demands the lackey take a good look at the wall he was on seconds ago. Down and completely humiliated, the redhead curls up in the dirt and begs for the violent massacre to just end once and for all. Ignoring the cowardly plea, the MC raises the flaming sword ready to deliver the final strike in the middle of the yard. Staring down the cornered villain from above, he smirks and warns that it's too late for any attempts at regret. The colossal burst of scarlet mana slams right into the ground, kicking up a thick cloud of debris all over the testing field. A tense silence takes over the place as the heavy smoke of destruction starts to slowly clear under the sunlight. Away from the impact zone, the big rookie smites and the other recruits watch with their jaws dropped, wondering what the heck just happened. Sweating cold at the unreal destruction, the short-haired guy is left completely speechless by a prodigy's brutality. Cutting through the dust curtain from the attack, the owner of the 7 wings emerges walking calmly while dragging a beaten body. The heir keeps a blank and calculating face, like you didn't just wipe out an entire platoon without breaking a sweat. Holding a tight grip on the crumpled collar of the noble uniform, he pulls his defeated cousin without showing an ounce of mercy. Getting close to the paralyzed crowd, the mage lets go of the dirty fabric and lets the lackey drop heavily onto the cracked dirt. Watching the fake leader fall, the rookies shake in their boots as they hear whispers questioning why they are just standing there doing nothing. Crawling pathetically through the dirt, Grion spits blood and weakly demands that the bot-out troop surround and finish the rival. He tries to throw the weight of his influential last name around, screaming desperately that this is a direct, unquestionable order from the military house. Annoyed by the defeated redhead's humiliating yelling, Smot steps forward, clicking his tongue, full of bottled-up frustration. Staring down the hesitant extras, the MC asks coldly if they really are that terrified of facing payback. Smites tightly grips his own weapon and frustratedly confesses that a low-ranking noble like him could get wiped out by any political breeze. Looking down heavily, he explains that the weak have no other choice but to act obediently so they don't piss off the rulers up top. Lifting his sweaty and outraged face, the youth yells that a boy born with everything could never understand the real struggles of commoners. Taking the explosive rant head-on, the owner of the 7 wings stays completely silent, listening to the big rookie's honest anger. A distant memory crosses the boy's mind, making his rigid expression soften slightly for a brief moment in the combat arena. Seeing the apparent calm on his unshakable opponent's face, the rookie stutters in confusion and asks what on earth he's smiling about in the middle of this tension. The prodigy's mind flashes back to the words of his own protective sister, remembering that Kudo had said something very similar in the past. Sighing deeply to regain focus, the MC warns he could counter the accusation, but agrees that his current life is extremely blessed. Trying to bounce back from the severe injuries on the floor, the red-haired lackey listens to the exchange without getting the bizarre turn the situation took. Raising his head with unshakable resolve, the heir declares that the only target of his true fury is the current and rotten main house. Overflowing with plenty of killer intent, he promises to crush all the corrupted military ruler's arrogance if the system can't be changed. The open declaration of rebellion hits the recruits like a truck, leaving the crowd bought out by bribes completely shocked and pale. Lying in the humiliating dust, the villain widens his despair-stained eyes and stutters, unable to believe the suicidal blasphemy he just heard. Quickly putting the pieces of the revolt speech together, Smites realizes the gravity of the words and understands the real weight of that deadly promise. Confirming the general shock of everyone present, the boy with golden eyes sets in stone that this aggressive speech is a formal declaration of war. He warns the scared students that kissing up to the corrupt nobility will only bring cowardly betrayals and tragic ends for anyone who chooses to bow down. Keeping the sharp and direct tone, the mage decrees that the only way to avoid this miserable slave fate is to grab their weapons and fight back against them. Pointing the giant sword at the paralyzed crowd, he claims that the unreachable power engraved on his back exists exactly for this revolutionary purpose. Putting the mercenary army against a moral wall, the prodigy demands to know which side they are going to choose to follow from that defining moment of the exam. Seeing total control slip through his beaten hands, the fallen cousin loses it completely and threatens to burn into his memory the faces and names of whoever dares betray him. Squeezed by two completely different monsters, the members of the enemy faction exchange terrified looks, not knowing how to act under the heavy tension. The lackey keeps screaming from the ground, reminding them with pure hate that the brutal punishment for disobeying the ruthless dupe's rules was known to everyone. With sweat running down the lines of his tense face, the big guy gulps, feeling the fear eat up every muscle while weighing the deadly choices of that day. On a sudden and suicidal impulse of courage, he lets out a loud yell and drops his defensive stance in front of his scared faction peers. Cursing his own cowardly luck, the short-haired recruit takes off running through the dirt yard, sprinting with all his limited strength. Charging fast and without hesitation toward the isolated MC, the rookie's aggressive move makes it look like he decided to stay loyal to the villain and attack. Watching the violent rush, the pathetic cousin smiles in pure relief, strongly believing the threats worked and the unbeatable monster will be caught off guard. Without moving a single muscle in his legs to defend against the apparent threat, the owner of the 7 wings just tracks the guy's desperate charge with watchful eyes. Rushing right past the unflinching target like a blind bolt of lightning, the big guy quickly brings his shaking hand to the red fabric band tied around his shoulder. With a rough pull fueled by adrenaline, he rips the enemy armband clean off, screaming at the top of his lungs that he is the firstborn of the small Smites family. Holding the torn fabric up in a dusty air, the youth yells for the whole military academy to hear that he chose to switch sides and officially support Aster against the oppressors. The brave betrayal right in the middle of the courtyard leaves the recruits and the lackey himself speechless, marking the exact moment Grian's perfect scheme crumbles forever. Terrified under the sword's shadow, the coward Grian curses Aster out, calling him a hick monkey in pure despair. Ignoring the insult, Smites turns to the other rookies and demands the paralyzed crowd step up. The big guy calls on everyone to show what they're made of and bet everything on the prodigy's 7 wings power. At that, his own teammates excitedly pull him in, agreeing to join the rebellion for real. Watching the scene calmly, the MC concludes he's already secured at least one side and won't have to do it all alone. However, he quickly realizes this amount of allies is still too small to manage to take down the main family. Meanwhile, the defeated lackey stays kneeling in the dusty dirt, chewing on his own humiliation. A young swordsman walks up calmly, reaching out a hand to ask if Grian is all right. Reacting with blind rage, the lackey slaps the extended hand away and tells the useless trash not to touch him. Totally unhinged, Grian screams, unable to accept the idea of some scum from the secondary family seizing power. The coward knows perfectly well that if he lets his cousin go through with this, he'll never be able to face his superiors again. Haunted by the past, he recalls a body fallen in the darkness and promises himself he won't end up like his brother. Gripping his own bloody hand tight, the villain gathers the rest of his resolve to keep fighting. Staring at the scene from above, Nolan coldly asks what the broken leader's problem is. The rookie's tone changes fast, and he mocks that his old acquaintance is looking pretty miserable. Recognizing his ally, Grian yells Nolan's name with a mix of relief and bottled-up anger. He aggressively calls his buddy out for disappearing, reminding him Nolan was in charge of handling the prodigy. In his twisted mind, the villain breaks into a sick smile, celebrating the fact he still has a strong trump card on his side. Clueless to the celebration, Nolan sizes Aster up in silence, acknowledging the boy's sword skills outclass everyone there. Out of patience, Grian snaps from the floor and orders his ally to push forward right now to chop the enemy to pieces. In response to the order, a piece of red cloth is roughly tossed through the air. Nolan throws his own ID band on the ground, dryly stating he only came to give that back. The swordsman makes it clear the defeated leader's dirty and cowardly methods go against his sense of chivalry. Not sugarcoating it, Nolan decrees the end of their alliance, leaving the lackey completely stunned in the dirt. Watching the mess from a distance, the official examiner panics, seeing yet another family switch sides. Turning his back on the fallen trash, the swordsman draws his weapon and tells Aster they are back to square one. The owner of the 7 wings just stares at the new opponent, waiting for the next move without showing any concern. Holding his blade firmly, the youth flexes the pride and tradition of his family's fencing techniques. He proposes a direct clash to test this traditional strength against the heir's absurd wing power. With the duel declared, Nolan unleashes an intense golden aura that wraps his entire sword in the courtyard. The young swordsman charges with everything, determined to prove once and for all which technique is truly superior. He blocks the attack super easily and calmly says that this fight will have to wait. With a flick of the scarlet blade, he deflects the enemy charge in a violent clash of magical energy. Feeling the weight of the direct impact, Nolan's eyes widen, surprised by the opponent's brute force. The swordsman slides through the dirt to catch his balance and realizes the prodigy is on a whole other level. Even impressed, the former traitor ally asks if the heir forgot the basic rules of the exam. Going in for another quick strike, he reiterates that only one team can pass the test to become a knight. Sword in hand, the youth tries to force the clash, assuring they have no choice but to settle everything right there. Aster dodges the blade effortlessly and mutters that solving things that way would be a huge hassle. Staring his rival down, the owner of the Seven Wings reveals his true intent and claims he wants to see Nolan pass. The friendly statement in the middle of the test stops the swordsman in his tracks, leaving him completely clueless. The heir argues that after hyping everyone up with the rebellion speech, it would be cowardly to ask them to quit. Flashing a confident smile, the mage assures he's already cooked up a perfect strategy to get everyone here approved. The boldness of the proposal leaves the swordsman stunned, while the cowardly lackey listens to the chat feeling a fresh wave of dread. Shocked by the impossible idea, Big Guy Smots blurts out there's zero chance the boy can break the rules. Resting his weapon on his shoulder, the prodigy admits he can't give absolute guarantees, but demands total cooperation from everyone. To kick off the crazy plan, he casually walks toward his biggest enemy fallen in the dirt. Completely battered and sweating cold, the wounded lackey looks up at the monster who crushed his hopes. Surprising everyone, Aster extends his hand in a friendly way and suggests they make peace immediately. The loud thump of the staff on the ground shatters the peaceful vibe, with the examiner demanding to know the meaning of this joke. Losing it over the test being paused, the man yells asking if the rookies even know how to raise a flag properly. Unfazed, the heir shoots back that the only win condition required taking over 2 or more areas of the field. He points to the poles where the 3 flags are tied together, cementing the alliance of the teams. Foaming at the mouth, the proctor gets in the boy's personal space, accusing him of turning the exam into an absolute joke. The other recruits watch the tense argument from afar and sweat nervously, doubting that logic will fly. Using a real-world scenario, the examiner asks if the boy would shake hands with the enemy in the middle of an official war. Aster keeps his sharp coolness and answers he would do it in a heartbeat if the opponent had value alive. The man completely loses his patience and screams that a knight is the state's sword, with no right to pass judgment. As a finishing blow, the MC points out they didn't break a single written disqualification rule. Caught off guard by the bulletproof and cynical argument, the examiner takes a step back, completely out of answers. Seizing the opening, Aster leans in even closer and whispers one last threat disguised as advice. He asks if the main military family would keep quiet if their fake leader got failed on a technicality. Backed into a corner by the political blackmail, the officer sweats cold and gulps, knowing he's trapped. With no way to make the call alone, the examiner is forced to check with his bosses, leaving the students waiting for an hour. The tension in the yard builds as Smites' boot taps impatiently on the ground, fearing the real consequences. The big guy panics, thinking they'll all get kicked out at once, but the MC just responds with indifference. Sitting comfortably on a crate, the heir argues the long wait proves the committee is actually debating the issue. On the other side, the former ambush leader crosses his arms and turns his head, clearly humiliated to have accepted the forced alliance. Curious about the sudden flip, the rookie asks the mage what he whispered to convince the rich kid to play along. Eyes shining with pure mischief, the owner of the Seven Wings cracks a cynical smile and answers he barely used anything at all. The chat is cut off abruptly when the complex's heavy wooden doors are thrown open violently. All recruits snap their attention to the entrance instantly, feeling the vibe get heavy as the authorities arrive. Getting his bossy posture back, the cornered examiner stands in the center and asks for everyone's full attention. In a loud, dramatic tone, he announces that the Academy's official director has taken responsibility for the outcome. Staring down the rebel youths with extreme seriousness, the man demands absolute silence to deliver the test's verdict. Watching a man approach, Smites asks in confusion if that guy is really the Academy director. Scolding the rookie, Grion tells him to show some respect, even if the director just looks like a regular old man. Count Maze walks right up to Aster and confesses the decision they had to make was a really tough one. He explains that taking in so many candidates all at once is something completely unprecedented in the exam's history. However, with the backing of the other directors, they decided to grant the Seven-Winged Prodigy's request. The heir asks straight up what this decision means in practice for everyone there. Keeping a chill expression, the director gets ready to give the final answer. Without dragging it out anymore, Maze officially decrees that all candidates have passed the exam. The news hits the recruits hard, making the crowd blow up in cheers for the unexpected win. Amid the happy shouts, the director asks them to keep working hard to prove the decision wasn't a mistake. Still not believing his own luck, Smites turns to Aster and congratulates him on getting into the academy. The official examiner takes the floor again and formally welcomes the new knights to the Drassel Kingdom Academy. Later, night falls over the massive facilities of the military complex newly taken over by the approved recruits. Chilling in the hot springs, Smites cheers that the food is amazing and the baths are huge. The big guy admits they're only enjoying all this luxury thanks to Aster's smarts. Running a hand through his wet hair, the owner of the Seven Wings just listens to his new ally's hype. Smites is still shocked the boy managed to get everyone past and promises to follow him for the rest of his life. Hearing the promise, Nolan calls the rookies sellouts for flipping sides so fast during the exam. Feeling attacked, Grion shoots back that he didn't lose the fight to the air, he just agreed to a strategic tie. Ignoring the excuse, the swordsman points out what matters as they challenge the main house and are now official candidates. Smites happily agrees, claiming these little wins are going to build up into a giant wave to crush the Elmheims. Aster bimes with the group's hype and declares that this is exactly where their rebellion truly begins. Thinking about the next steps, he remembers his two older sisters already graduated, but Alphen is still at the institution. Since classes start the next day and the girl has already been there for a year, she'll definitely help him settle in. Getting out of the hot water, the heir decides the most urgent thing right now is getting used to the routine of this place. Right then, a weird noise coming from the other side of the hot springs catches the prodigy's attention. He turns around confused and comes face to face with a totally bizarre scene going down in the middle of the bath. Freaked out, the mage takes a step back and asks what on earth all those huddled recruits are doing. The rookies are on their knees praying to him, explaining that a living bearer of the Seven Wings is a good luck charm. Seeing the crazy fanboying from the crowd begging for divine favors, the boy bursts out laughing and tells him to knock it off. Isolated in a corner of the bath, Grion hugs his knees, feeling the weight of his recent choices. The coward looks out the academy window and admits to himself he's already terrified of what the future holds. Far away from there, the darkness of the night covers the main family's imposing mansion, where the vibe is pure tension. Staring down the lackey kneeling on the floor, Helen Elmheim shows her deep disappointment with the exam's pathetic result. She throws in his face that instead of sinking the secondary family's boy, he just took the humiliation quietly. Desperate, the lackey begs his mother for forgiveness and tearfully promises he'll fix this mistake next time he gets a chance. Before he can even finish his sentence, Grion's face is violently slammed by a brutal kick. The attacker screams at him that there won't be a next time for useless trash like him. From the cheap shot, the boy is thrown backward and goes rolling across the stone floor of the hallway. Lillian Elmheim walks over stomping hard, declaring he's a total failure just like Darius. Bleeding and curled up on the floor, the guy begs his own sister to have some mercy and stop the beatings. Ignoring the cries for help, the woman keeps kicking the fallen body with pure cruelty and frustration. Every strike is loaded with hate for the constant screw-ups that have stained the prestigious main family's name. Taking the physical punishment in silence, the coward blames all that pain and suffering entirely on Aster's existence. The memory of the moment in the courtyard flashes back to Grion's mind, recalling when the prodigy offered his hand for a forced alliance. Still in the exam flashback, the lackey asks what the rival means by the danger of coming back empty-handed. With a dark look, Aster warns that the main family's lord will definitely end him if he finds out he failed. The cold threat makes the coward's blood run cold, realizing his demise would be the only punishment for his failure. The MC brings up Darius's final moments, describing the brutal scene as something messed up to see. Whispering close to the wounded lackey's ear, the heir reminds him no one should lose their life in such a miserable way. Aster pins the coward to the wall and asks straight up if he wants to share his dead relative's tragic fate. Shaking with terror, Grion listens to the final offer to keep his mouth shut during the mess in exchange for help surviving. Back in the present at the mansion, a male voice orders Lillian to stop beating their fallen brother. The guy cynically points out that the family's cute little boy is already crying and apologizing for his mistakes. Chilling on a spacious sofa, Julius Elmheim opens his arms and declares that everyone there is a family united by blood. Dripping with fake sympathy, the man insists that relatives must always get along and keep the house together. While he talks, he keeps a possessive hand gripping Alphen's head, who sits perfectly still with a terrified face. Standing in front of the window, Lillian complains that their house's image of absolute dominance has started to shake. She blames the existence of the unreachable Seven Wings' power directly for destroying the reputation they've built. Turning to her brother on the couch, the purple-haired woman decrees that the two of them need to step up to restore order. With a crazy gleam in her eye, Lillian states they don't carry the main family name just for show. Julius agrees with a sadistic smile. saying it's time to remind the freshmen what real violence looks like. The next morning, the newly approved students gather in military formation in the academy's giant courtyard for the opening speech. The head instructor yells from the front that all these youths were handpicked to serve the kingdom. He highlights that the Royal Knights form an unbeatable elite troop, outclassing any other force on the battlefield. To keep up this standard of excellence, the man demands that the aspirants there prove they are special too. The recruits pay close attention to the harsh words, understanding that passing the exam was just step one. The instructor continues, explaining the academy system is strict and ruthless with anyone who can't keep up the pace. He reveals the students are split into 6 rank tiers, and their curriculum depends entirely on that grade. The officer makes it clear that the higher a cadet's capacity, the better chances they'll have to learn advanced techniques. Pointing out the common limits, he states that someone who only knows how to swing a sword is nothing more than a third-rate warrior. Meanwhile, those who can handle basic magic and fight at the same time are placed right in the mid-tier. The examiner sets in stone that true excellence and the top of the food chain require absolute mastery over both blade and mana. Unleashing an intimidating red aura, the man warns that the institution doesn't have time to waste on average fools. The speech ends with the brutal demand that the only freedom allowed to students is constantly fighting to get stronger. The instructor points at a distant target and asks if the recruits really think they can hit that level right off the bat. Wasting no time, Aster steps right up with his sword drawn, emitting a strong magical energy from the blade. With a swift motion, the MC delivers a clean, precise strike against the reinforced iron pillar. The examiner is blown away by how easily the boy cuts through the tough material and admits he is undeniably special. Keeping his chill posture, the heir just listens to his peers' shocked whispers in the background. Watching from afar, 2 officers chat about the absurd talent and wonder if that's the famous bearer of the 7 wings. But they know the prodigy's true potential goes way beyond just slicing through a magic rock. The men conclude that if the boy settles for just that, he'll end up getting devoured easily. Sitting comfortably in his dark office, Count Maze silently agrees with that brutal take. The director is fully aware that the whole institution is crawling with predators ready to pounce on any weakness. Later on, the rookies gather by the windows to check out their official rankings after the practical test. Holding his card, Nolan sighs tiredly and comments on how obsessed the academy is with meritocracy. The swordsman complains that only he and Aster got dumped into Tier 6 out of all the approved freshmen that year. He admits he kinda saw it coming that he'd be left behind, staring at the humiliating rookie emblem in his hands. Chuckling at the complaint, the heir reminds him they need to reach at least Tier 2 to become Royal Knights. Noticing his buddy's chill vibe, Nolan jokes around calling the boy boss and points out how hard he is on himself. The MC gets totally confused by the nickname and asks why he's suddenly being treated so formally out of nowhere. Sweating cold, the swordsman reminds him it was the heir himself who promised to crush the main family in front of everyone. He argues some recruits took that threat seriously, hoping to turn around their humiliating situation. Big Guy smites, and the rest of the crew really put all their chips on the bearer of the 7 wings. Smates walks up all height and insists the whole squad is ready to carry their new leader straight to the top of the ranks. Throwing an arm around the boy's shoulders, he yells excitedly that they're all gonna wreck the Elmheims together. Flashing a smirk, the prodigy agrees the only way out is to get way stronger to protect everyone. He repeats the goal to tear down the oppressors while keeping a cold and focused look on his face. But, breaking the tense vibe, the MC points out their immediate priority is filling their stomachs before the next training session. Walking through the institution's halls, he notices a weird crowd completely blocking the main hallway. Trying to figure out the mess, the 2 are stopped by panicking recruits warning them the main family is in the cafeteria. The frantic report says one of the nobles is aggressively scarfing down food while stirring up trouble. Pushing through the scared crowd, Aster hears an arrogant voice complaining about how long they're taking to bring lunch. He finds Julius chilling comfortably on top of defeated students, backed up by his sister Lillian. Staring at the brutal scene, Nolan whispers asking if that sadistic guy is actually his new boss's brother. Without taking his eyes off the enemy, Aster confirms the 2 are the infamous tyrant siblings from the main bloodline. The duo's reputation is built on extreme cruelty and the violent methods they use against anyone who gets in their way. The MC admits to himself he had completely forgotten about their annoying presence at the academy. Looking at the newcomer, Lillian mocks that he has a cute face, totally different from the disgusting trash under her boots. Beneath the woman's feet, a boy wearing a heavy iron mask groans in pain, unable to fight back against the beatings. Nolan is horrified by the unprovoked brutality and asks what's up with that bizarre torture gear. With a dark look, the heir explains that it's an iron gag designed for severe punishments. The cruel item is used to torture and discipline weak relatives who've made unforgivable slip-ups in the family's name. Laughing at the grim explanation, Julius praises the boy's detailed knowledge about the house's dark traditions. He yanks Grion's hair hard, disgusted that the failure dragged their name through the mud with a tier 6 grade. The tyrant ironically states that the mere existence of someone so useless is already a pathetic joke. Keeping the crazy smile, the man reveals the mask was a special gift to push the coward to try harder. He explains that starving their own family's trash of food, water, and fresh air is the best possible reward for failure. Scattered across the dark cafeteria, dozens of veterans shake with exhaustion, knowing they'll suffocate if they stop trying to pry the gear off. Shocked by the sight of the haul, Nolan realizes in terror that all the captured veterans are wearing the same deadly item. Chilling in his power stance, Julius tells the rookies to shut their mouths and show some respect to the older students. At that, Lillian walks over to a light-haired girl and forces her to introduce herself in front of the fresh arrivals. The girl's slow steps echo through the cafeteria as she's pushed into the center of attention in a humiliating way. The young woman stops with her back to the tyrants and faces Aster, keeping her head down in total silence. The heir's golden eyes widen in pure shock, refusing to believe who is standing right in front of him. Feeding off the prodigy's obvious despair, the villain mocks how his sister looks like a completely different person now. Standing motionless in the middle of the room, Alphen is also wearing the heavy torture mask and shows deep physical exhaustion. Seeing the insane situation, Smites yells the girl's name in despair while the MC clenches his fists. Ashamed by the cruel exposure, the young woman looks away, feeling the heavy weight of the public humiliation. A silent fury takes over Aster, making his magical aura start leaking from his body. In an explosive move, he draws his giant sword straight from the sheath, ready for the incoming fight. Consumed by uncontrollable hate, the boy charges forward, demanding to know what those monsters did to his sister. Before he can reach the target, another iron gag is tossed onto the floor and slides right to his feet. Keeping his laid-back posture on the couch, the tyrant raises his hand and tells the prodigy to cool off right now. The dark metal piece rolls across the stone floor with a muffled clank, stopping dead in front of the invading team. The group of rookies stares at the object nervously, while Julius lets them know he brought plenty of spare gear for all of them. Standing up slowly off the fallen bodies, the villain opens his arms and invites the recruits to a fun welcome party.